Hey everyone, welcome to GameFace, episode 121 on Sifted Games at Sifted.net, and I have a very special guest with me today.
I'm special, all right.
Mr. Colin Moriarty.
Thank you for having me. I put on pants today, I left my apartment, and here I am.
Colin, you're not getting out much these days.
No, I have no time. And also I live in Santa Monica, and we were just talking about, it took me, you're like 7 miles from me or
Is
something
it even
like that.
7 miles?
It's like maybe 6.5 miles by road from me, and it took me an hour and 10 minutes to get here today.
In an Uber, yeah.
Yeah, in an Uber. So it's too much. Putting on pants is hard enough for me, but no, running CLS is obviously a full-time job. So I'm lucky to be here. I'm fortunate to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming, man. I appreciate you fighting through the LA insanity to get here.
You're very welcome. And apparently it just started pouring right when I...
Yeah, it waited at least for that, for you to get here.
It's like ominous, the whole thing, isn't it?
It never rains here, like ever. Colin, if you guys are regulars on our stream and maybe aren't familiar with Colin, want to give him a quick bio of your past?
Sure. I'm Colin Moriarty. Is this my one?
That's your one,
I haven't been... This is the first time I've done a video podcast since I left Kind of Funny. I'm Colin Moriarty. I am 33 years old from Long Island, New York. I was senior editor of IGN for many years, and then I left that to found Kind of Funny, which I then left a year ago, almost to the date, to found Colin's Last Stand. So that's what I do now. And I'm here in LA. It's been almost a year. And it's very different down here, and we're getting San Francisco weather.
Better different?
No, different.
You don't like LA compared to SF?
I don't know. San Francisco was super expensive. I had a $3,000 apartment there, which was considered a steal, and it was 3 bedrooms. So getting away from that like kind of, it felt like, if I wanted to spend that much money, I'd go home to New York and live in a cool city. But so I wanted to come down to LA. It's a little cheaper. It's nicer. The weather's nice. People are nice.
You live in Santa Monica. It's like paradise.
Yeah, I live like 2 blocks from the beach in Santa Monica. It's awesome. So no, it's different. I don't want to. It's like children.
Yeah.
I know I like the New York child better than the other children though. So
gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So anyway, you are on Patreon.
Yes.
Patreon.com/Colin's Last Stand.
Yes. Yes. Kind of when we launched Kind of Funny, we were the first big. I'm so confused now.
It's all good.
God, I really need to leave more often. We were the first big Patreon, and we really learned a lot from using that. And so when I left Kind of Funny, I just started a new one, and people have been very kind to me and very generous. So I appreciate that very much. And I know we got some nice crossover between our audiences too. Now that you were on Fireside Chats, my podcast, not too long ago, and so there's a nice symbiotic relationship between I think lots of gaming Patreons, whether it's ours and Easy Allies or No Clip or whatever the case might be.
Yep.
People are getting in and understanding kind of what we're trying to do, so it's pretty cool.
Yep. What kind of gaming content do you do at Colin's Last Stand?
So CLS is 4 shows that are totally unrelated to each other. One is political and historical, but that's on hiatus because I wanted to start doing something else, and we'll bring that back at some point. So the 3 shows right now are Fireside Chats, which is what you were on, which is a podcast series where I interview random people. So I interviewed someone last week about cryptocurrency. I interviewed a few months ago a prostitute, which was awesome.
Really?
Yeah, it was awesome. She's like a high-end escort.
How did you find that person to interview?
That's a long story. Next week I have my friend Dave Rubin on from the Rubin Report. So it's just about different people that I'm curious about and want to just pick their brains. So we have Fireside Chats. We have Knockback, which is the podcast series I just started with my brother Dagan, who's a lead animator and designer at Sesame Workshop, and it's all retro themed. So our first episode was about Empire Strikes Back. Our second episode was about Nintendo consoles, ranking the Nintendo consoles. We just
did you give number 1?
NES.
Okay.
We just did one about the Twilight Zone and G.I. Joe, so that's all that. And then the video game show on YouTube is called Side Quest. And I originally called it that because it was supposed to be something I was going to do on the side, and it quickly became the biggest show I do. And those are basically video essays that I do once a week on Monday, and I'm working on the one for Monday right before I came here. So while I was waiting for Ni no Kuni 2 to come in the mail, but
I'm also waiting for it.
I think they sent it this week, but it still hasn't come.
I think hopefully tomorrow. I'm praying that it's in the mailbox tomorrow. It's weird. They're sending out like hard copies of the game instead of just sending out download codes.
Yeah, which is cool. I used to hate much more on hard copies of games, but it takes time. Spectrum Internet's terrible. So, but yeah, no, I was really looking forward to playing that this weekend, and now I'm probably gonna have to subject myself to more Secret of Mana, which is.
We'll discuss that in a bit.
God help me.
Yeah. Just some housekeeping on the Sifted side before we get started. Pactor Factor this week. There's not going to be a new Pactor Factor on Sifted, but that is because episode 100 of Pactor Factor is coming up. I can't believe Well, first of all, we're at like episode 121 of GameFace. I can't believe that.
It's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And we're at 100 is next for Pactor Factor, and we are doing something very, very special for episode 100. So special, in fact, that it's going to take a good week and a half to produce it. So I'm not going to spoil anything else other than that. Just wanted to let you know there won't be a new ep on Sifted this Monday, as there usually is. Another episode will roll out onto our YouTube channel on Tuesday for you guys, if you aren't subscribers or patrons to Sifted. So just want to give you that little heads up. But I think we're ready to rock, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a shame we're doing it this week. I kind of wish you could have come in next week because there are a lot of big games that are about to come out. Like, I just got review code for Sea of Thieves right before I came here.
Oh, cool.
I'm really excited to play that after playing the beta. Obviously, Ni no Kuni 2 is about to come out.
Yes.
So I feel like next week is kind of the start of the year in a lot of ways. It's been a really slow first quarter in games.
Which is awesome, because first of all, I've said
it's
many
good
times,
for you with doing the content you do.
Well, yeah.
Trying to do a video cast every week, it's a little tough.
Yeah, I don't have to be. That's the beauty of not being at IGN or Kind of Funny anymore. I love both those places, but not having to like subject myself to everything. I actually literally gave my Xbox One away because I'm never going to play it. I'd never play it, and then I play a few things on Switch, but I spent a lot of the time. I platinumed BioShock 2 earlier this year. I platinumed BioShock Infinite. I'm close to the platinum in Dying Light, so I've been catching up.
You're so lucky that you
I've been
can
catching
do
up on
that
old stuff.
and
It's
like
awesome.
make a living.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm playing the way I keep telling people, what I keep telling people is I'm playing games the way gamers play games.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And so I don't have, I have something like 500 PS4 games, like literally.
Yeah,
and I don't need to play any of them. And it's nice. So I'm just reaching out to PR, like, I'm good friends with, with Denny and Nick over at Namco, for instance, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll send you a copy of Ni no Kuni. Or I was talking to Ubisoft about Far Cry and all. So I just kind of.
That's another one that's coming soon.
Yep, which I'm super excited about, especially because of the political slant with side quests. I think we're going to
that'll work out well for you.
It's going to be awesome. So it's nice to be able to pick and choose.
Yeah.
I feel a little more normal and a little less, scattered, as it were. People used to get mad at me. I remember my last year, Kind of Funny calendar year, I played something like 72 games.
Yeah.
And you can see the trophies for all of them. I played them. And beat probably half of them or something like that. And people were like, that's not enough for you to do a video game podcast. And I'm like, I can't do this.
How much more can you play?
I can't do this anymore.
But each game is like at least 10 to 15 hours.
Yeah,
a lot of them are like 30, 40, 50.
Yeah, not everything's like Edith Finch. So to be able to sit down and play Dying Light for literally 70 hours in the 3 years, literally 3 years after it came out, great.
Bro, you have found the sweet spot.
Yes.
I am, on the other hand, still on the squirrel wheel, my friend. I remember when I worked at Game Trailers, it's like I go to work every day, and I was the supervisor of everybody. And I'd look at like what's in the edit bays today. We had like 14 edit bays when GT was in its heyday. And like, our production supervisor would come to me and be like, we got 3 bays open. What are we doing? And I'd be like, shit. Like, I have to go talk to my team like, yo, we need to get content in the edit bay every day.
Yeah, the churn's rough, man. I can't do it anymore.
I kind of enjoy it in some ways. It keeps like life and work exciting and it makes every day different, but it can be very stressful. If you let it get to you, especially. Yeah.
No, it's super stressful. I mean, at IGN, I ran PlayStation coverage, so having, at the time, 3 platforms to worry about with Vita and PS3 and PS4, it was difficult to kind of keep up with everything and then kind of delegate. And so not having, and then Kind of Funny, we kind of truncated. I mean, we were pretty shamelessly a PlayStation-centric channel. And so now I kind of just wear that on my sleeve and do the best I can.
What is your area of expertise?
Absolutely. And I'm only one person. And what's cool is that I think the audience, at least for Colin's Last Stand, they understand, like, they get 3 pieces of content a week, and I do the best I can to deliver those things. But so I'm not like a jack of all trades. They know exactly what they're getting. And so they seem to like it. I'm going to start doing it. I guess I'll let your audience know and the people that are watching. I am going to do a Let's Play series. I'm going to roll that out starting in April with my brother, and it's going to be all old school.
Does he live local?
He's in Philadelphia, so we.
Oh wow! So I'm from Philly.
Did we? Oh, so
we kind of discussed.
Right. And you're a Flyers fan?
I'm not. I'm a Penguins fan.
Wow, that's bizarre.
Well, I'm originally from Central Pennsylvania. I went to college in Philadelphia.
Neither of those choices are okay with me.
Well, I hate the Flyers, but I do not hate your Islanders, by the way.
Well, thank you. No one should, because they haven't done anything to anyone.
You said it, not me.
But God, they're terrible this year. But yeah, no. So I flew him out for a few days to Santa Monica to record the first 8 episodes of our podcast, and then I'm going to fly to Philadelphia in early April for 5 days, and we're going to record 8 to 10 new episodes of Knockback, and then hopefully 8 to 10 episodes of our Let's Play series, which is going to be all retro games. So. I haven't told anyone that yet, but that's the plan. Yeah.
GameFace exclusive.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, straight from Colin.
There you go.
A couple things actually before we go. I forgot to mention Matt Kyle, my normal co-host, who can't be here today because he's recovering from a procedure. His procedure went great. He's feeling great. He even said that maybe if push came to shove, he could have been here today. We're going to give him another week of rest. He'll be back next week. So I just want to let you guys know that he's doing great. Everything went fine. And he should be back in the co-host chair for next week's episode with all the games that we're talking about.
That's great. That's great.
Out. But we do have a great show for you today. I think we put together a pretty good rundown of pretty good topics.
Yes, absolutely.
And let's get on with it. The first thing we're going to talk about is probably the biggest reveal of the week, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, although I struggle to say the biggest reveal of the week because we knew about this for a really long time.
Yeah, since 2016, I think it was Kotaku that I remember it because I remember being so bizarre that there was a guy in Montreal on the subway with a laptop. He's probably a marketing guy. Yeah. With Shadow of the Tomb Raider logo on his screen, working on a deck. Yeah. And in the gaming industry, people are always sending decks around.
People don't realize either that game fans are on it.
Oh, yeah,
it's like if you are flying or on a train and you see something like that on a laptop, you're going to pull out your cell phone camera, you're going to snap it, you're going to go on social media and share it. Next thing you know, everybody knows about it.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I think there's kind of a code amongst media types and people in the industry that we all know a lot of things but don't. I personally
know a lot.
Yeah,
but we're under NDAs and
sure, and even
so we can't share it. But somebody on a train,
even friendies and stuff like that, or just hearing things, hearing rumors. There's kind of a code that we don't, divulge that information. But if you're just a person on the train,
you haven't signed anything.
You're not, there's no, and you have no loyalty or alliance to any of these people either.
Yeah.
I felt bad for that guy. At first I was like, that guy probably should be fired, but then I'm like, well, that's an easy thing for me to say.
Yeah, but would you have been on a train with your laptop open with that kind of information?
No, although I am shocked. You wouldn't. I am shocked at some of the conversations I have had in public
that haven't been picked up.
About games or things that people have told me even in public.
Yeah.
And I remember at E3 in 2008, or someone randomly telling me, which is not a big deal now, but about Mass Effect 2, which wasn't even announced yet. He's like, by the way, you're saved from Mass Effect. Well, go to Mass Effect 2. And he was telling me this at the W or something. And I'm like, that's a pretty big deal. But then you kind of learn not to, and now obviously that's kind of passe. But
we always kind of get put in a position. I think a lot of it depends on what kind of journalist you are. If you're like Jason Schreier at Kotaku, I'm guessing publishers, developers don't have those kinds of conversations with him because that if he hears something, he's going to report it.
Right.
Unless he signs some kind of NDA or something like that. So I think a lot of it is kind of a feeling out process where you're kind of reading the other person or the other person and what position they're in and whether they would report something like that. I think if somebody tells me something, I'm probably going to report it.
Sure.
And I think people know, though, that that's the type of games journalist I am, that if I hear something, I'm going to report it unless I've agreed to keep it off the record or I've signed an NDA.
Sure.
But look, there's an advantage of being the other side where they trust you because if people are willing to talk to you and share secrets with you, you have the ability to keep that kind of in your back pocket and then use that to shape your coverage and your commentary a lot based on that information. You don't have to share that information, but you can use that information as kind of like a secret weapon in a lot of ways to prepare yourself for coverage that's to come and make sure you have guys ready to go when something's going to break and things like that. Not necessarily break the story, but still you can utilize that information to your advantage, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when Greg and I on Podcast Beyond and PS I Love You used to do PlayStation predictions for E3 or for Tokyo Game Show or Gamescom or whatever it was, people would often read into what we didn't say because we had a very strict rule that anything that we actually knew or was feeding into things that we couldn't say, we wouldn't actually guess. So people would take our guesses and then work around them to figure things out, which I thought was pretty fun.
Reverse engineer it, essentially.
Exactly. Because and it's so funny how long things sometimes take. I left IGN at the end of 2014. Sony Ben's game, which is called Days Gone Now, was at that time called Dead Don't Ride. And I heard about that game. At least that was what it was codenamed for being called. Yeah. And I heard about it literally in 2014. No one heard anything about it until late 2015. The game just got delayed and is not coming out this year. So it's funny also how these through lines last sometimes many years.
Absolutely.
And how things gestate, but also how secretive we are. And a shout out to Jason Schreier because he's one of the only journalists that actually is a journalist in the industry.
He's great.
Most of these people are just rewriting press releases.
No, you're right. A lot of them are just rewriting the stuff that he writes.
Yeah, and politicizing everything for no reason. So props to him because he literally is the provenance of almost any story that breaks can be drawn back to him, which is pretty
typically, cool. Yeah, absolutely. So let's actually talk about Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the game. Have you played the prior two kind of reboots?
Yeah, so I played the first one just a little bit, but the second one, which was called what?
Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah. I played the shit out of that game. I loved it. We can curse on this, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And I loved it. It's funny. It's one of those games, though. It reminds me of Bloodborne a little bit, where I spent an enormous amount of time with it, but then just didn't beat it. Like I got.
You never finished it?
No, I got to the. As you know, with my platinum obsession, I'm a completionist. I like to do everything.
Yeah.
I study trophies and like study what are called roadmaps to see like where you miss things and very meticulously go at it. So I played the game for 40 hours probably and got everything and did everything, and then something came out.
You realize the game is only about 15, 17 hours long.
Yeah, I get the collectibles and do all the special thing. I think I played.
That's hilarious.
I think I got around to playing it when Horizon was about to come out, which we obviously got early, and I think so that knocked me off, and then I never got back to it.
Yeah.
So it was but I loved it. It was.
Well, you played it for that long. You totally get the game.
Yeah,
so we can
great.
discuss it.
Sure.
How much did you play of the first one, the original reboot?
Maybe 4 or 5 hours at the most. Yeah.
So you didn't spend a ton of time.
No.
So one thing I would say, I played both to completion, although I did not spend as much time with Rise of the Tomb Raider as you did, I admit. I finished the game, and I went back and played kind of some of the challenge stuff, like a little bit more afterwards. One thing I would say about the two games is, overall, I think I'm a bigger fan of the first one, the original reboot. And what I liked about it was the character development of Lara. She goes from being this like naive whatever to the Tomb Raider. And I think that was kind of the idea, to give her a backstory and actually give her a little bit more depth than what we got in the earlier retro games.
Sure.
And I feel like that was lost a little bit in Rise of the Tomb Raider. It felt like character development was kind of put on the back burner in favor of, I don't know, I think the gameplay in Rise of the Tomb Raider kind of went back to the original games a lot more. Like, there's actual tomb raiding.
Right.
And so I think I actually liked the moment-to-moment gameplay a little bit more in Rise, but I liked the overall experience of the first reboot a little bit more. But I enjoyed both of them. I think both of them are excellent games, very well crafted, very polished, very well paced.
Sure.
Both games.
Yeah.
But I did have some issues with Rise of the Tomb Raider. Did you have any when you finished?
No, I mean, I kind of, I thought the combat could use a little bit of work. There are great examples of third-person action that I think work better.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily talking about like it's analog and Uncharted or anything like that, but when you play a game like Horizon, or you play some of these very action-y third-person games, I think you can find more fluidity in those games, which kind of holds this game back. But what I liked about it was that it made me think about not fighting, and it made me think about being a little more stealthy and a little more clever. What I drew out of it, God of War is right around the corner, another game that I can't wait to play.
It's coming out fast.
And being developed just a couple miles from where I live, and I can feel it emanating out of there. It's almost it's ready to go.
Sony Santa Monica was literally just across the parking lot from Game Trailers.
Oh, so that was easy for you when we had our
building,
there.
and then a parking lot in between, and then Sony Santa Monica.
Was it the old Sony Santa Monica?
Yeah.
I remember that building. It was like so nondescript. It was awesome. It was like a
never would have guessed what was in there.
No,
Yeah.
as opposed to like Naughty Dog, they work in like a palace. Yeah. And they're not too far away from there either.
No, they're not.
But what I drew out of that with the God of War connection is this idea of making open world games that are actually not really open world but feel open and are segmented. Now, games have done that before, Tomb Raider obviously, but Tomb Raider seeped into the gaming consciousness in a way that I didn't expect it to. And you're seeing that in God of War. When I first saw God of War, the reboot, I thought of Tomb Raider. I'm like, this is God of War.
That's the first game I thought of.
Yeah, God of War needs work. Kratos is a boring and terrible character. He needs more, not humanity, but more character.
Yeah.
And the game needs more structure because the combat's great, but what are we doing? Are we playing this old kind of game, this PS2 era game, or are we going to play something newer? And I love how they drew inspiration from that game, because that's what I loved about it the most, was it gave the game scope without overwhelming me. When I played Witcher 3, for instance, I couldn't even beat it because, again, my OCD kicked in, and I'm like, I can't do all this. And eventually, so I'm not going to
overwhelmed.
So I'm not going to do any of it. And that was kind of my problem. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there were in this game, like I said, it was kind of a throwback gameplay-wise. It felt a little bit more like the original Tomb Raiders. Obviously, sort of the faux open world that you talked about. It also feels a little bit like Metroid. There's parts of this game where you know where you need to go, but you need a very specific tool in order to access that new area. You need an arrow, a fire arrow, to burn down a barrier, or you need a rope that'll help you climb a tree so you can get over a big fence or whatever. And I like that a lot about Rise of the Tomb Raider, and that's something I hope that they end up carrying over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider
I'm sure
well.
they will. I'm sure.
But then there were also little things, like crafting was a big part of the game. But you couldn't just craft anytime you wanted. You always had to go to the campfire to craft. And if you play a lot of games like this in the modern age, that's typically not how it works. Like, you just have an interface, you can hit pause, it comes up, you can craft whatever you want on the fly, and off you go. So I felt like there were a couple things with Rise of the Tomb Raider that they could very easily fix to kind of get Shadow of the Tomb Raider up to where I think a game should be in 2018.
Yeah, I'm sure they will do that. I like more of The Last of Us's crafting system, where, just as an example, where there's a an emphasis on real time, like
Yeah.
where you're doing it in the action, and so I like that. But I do like menu-based things where you can do it at any time. It doesn't feel quite as stifling, so that is a problem. But yeah, you know what else I liked about it? Having very limited experience with the original PS1 versions. I bought Tomb Raider 3. I got it for Christmas in like 8th grade or something, and that was my introduction to the series. I liked Laura. Like I thought she was an interesting character.
Everybody did.
But in terms of her humanity, in terms of her of the archaeology, it didn't seem quite as derivative of Uncharted as I would have thought. Now, let's be clear, this is derivative of Uncharted. This game
absolutely.
Now, it's so funny how full circle it comes. There would be no Uncharted.
If it weren't for Tomb Raider.
Naughty Dog would have never pursued what they called Project Big if it wasn't for Tomb Raider. And then there would be no of this new Tomb Raider without Uncharted. So they're definitely borrowing from each other. But it didn't feel quite as derivative as I thought. And I would say that I probably liked Rise of the Tomb Raider more than I liked Uncharted 4. So it was...
Interesting.
So it was... Because I liked the meat on the bone.
No, I would agree with you in some ways because Uncharted 4 to me, maybe it's because it did kind of have a protracted development cycle, but there were parts of it where it felt like an older game. And maybe part of that is the engine that Naughty Dog have been working on with Uncharted for so long. They tried to fake it. There are parts of the game where it almost tries to fool you into believing that it's an open world game, like some of the Jeep sections and things like that, where you can drive vehicles. The worlds were certainly a lot bigger. You're not as much loading as you got in prior Uncharted games. But it did feel, in some ways, a little bit like a throwback. But that's a really good question. I honestly don't know which game I liked more, Uncharted 4 or Rise of the Tomb Raider. But again, I liked the original reboot better than Rise of the Tomb Raider, and it is because of Lara, because they did a great job of developing her and making her this character that goes from being this naive kind of daughter of a genius into this gritty ass kicker, for lack of a better phrase. And I just didn't feel like she moved at all in Rise of the Tomb Raider. She started as the same character as she finished as. And in the first game, I felt like it just really transformed my thoughts of her, because you're right. One thing about the original Tomb Raiders is the original Tomb Raiders came along when we were all playing games like Bubsy 3D and Mario and all these cartoony, kind of outlandish, over-the-top characters. She was kind of the first human character that you could actually kind of relate to a little bit. And I think that was a big reason why it was so popular, and also why it's endured for so long. I think she endeared people to her very quickly and very early on. And I think that's why this franchise is still getting great sequels decades later.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So yeah, I'm excited. And Crystal's not making it, right? It's being made in Quebec, right? So it's So that's
a little risky.
Yeah, I think that it can be, but the tools are there. I'm sure they're using the same engine and and I'm sure that it reminds me of when Bend made that Uncharted game on Vita. Naughty Dog was still very much involved in that. It's just another team doing it. So, and I would think that Vita Uncharted game is actually better than Drake's Fortune. So you can get something good or something great, and I'm confident, and I love that it's coming out in September, because August and September are those prime moments right before the shit hits the fan, where you have a moment to get into it. So I think the timing's perfect, and I can't wait.
Well, everyone's trying to avoid Red Dead Redemption 2 at this point.
Oh yeah, when they blew that out and put it in the fall, they can do whatever they want, right, Rockstar?
I mean,
so they're going to screw a lot of people.
There aren't too many franchises that can convince Call of Duty to change its release date. That it's had for the last 10 years. It's always been first week in November.
Right.
Now all of a sudden it's in October.
Yeah, smart. Get it out. You're playing with a big dog with that game. You don't want to play with fire.
Power of Rockstar.
Absolutely.
It's pretty amazing. So, yeah, the full reveal of this is coming April 27th, so not long to wait. The teaser trailer, I think Sam showed a couple times. Not much to it. They could have taken those scenes from any of the prior two Tomb Raider games, and you never would have been the wiser. So we didn't get much, but stuff had kind of leaked out about it. I feel like maybe their hand was pressured a little bit. Plus, the movie just came out, and I'm sure there's some kind of agreement there where they can do some bumper marketing off of each other.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if this teaser is shown before the Tomb Raider movie in theaters. And
it's so funny, too, when I was reading Jason's story. None of these games have been announced yet, but he's like, these guys aren't working on it because they're working on a Guardians of the Galaxy game. And these guys aren't working on it because they're working on an Avengers game and all that. So there's a lot of good stuff that's unannounced yet. And what I like about this announcement, too, happening in March, is everyone's holding their cards close to their chest now, and I love that. Bethesda was really the ones that started doing that a few years ago with Fallout 4 specifically. I think it's smart to build anticipation in short amounts of time, get people engaged, and then you don't have things like Days Gone that are going to dangle for the next, or Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is never going to come out.
Ben has been working on Days Gone for like 7 years now?
Yeah, I think... I'm trying to even think of what I know that's off the record and on the record. They were working on other stuff in between Uncharted, Golden Abyss, and I think they were even working on porting that game at some point. And then then I don't think the full production started until like 2014. So it's been like probably it's too long. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that game too is it's not even being built on proprietary Sony like Sony middleware or Sony engines. It's being built on Unreal, which is unusual, right? That's very weird.
It's not a good sign to me.
Yeah, so
it may have been strategic. That's how Sony's kind of spinning it. Is like, oh, we didn't need it, and so we pushed it. 7 years. That's a long time.
Well, it's just I fear for them, and I fear for Media Molecule in the sense that, I think I hate to say it, I know some of the guys at Media Molecule, including Saban, and they're really nice people, and I just think that sometimes you have to shit or get off the pot, and I wouldn't be surprised if Media Molecule's last game was Dreams, and I wouldn't be surprised at this point if Ben's last game is Days Gone, just because you have to produce in the time that Media Molecule's been working on Dreams, for instance. Naughty Dog released Uncharted 3, The Last of Us, and The Last of Us 2 is probably going to come out within 6 months of it too. So.
And by the way, it's not like Naughty Dog is like an assembly line of video games. Yeah. Like it usually takes its time with games as well.
Yeah, you got to produce.
I mean, with Days Gone, like we do a thing on Sifted. It's a Sifted video game fantasy draft. I don't know if you ever played fantasy football.
Yeah, obsessively. There's lots of money in it.
Okay, well, it's essentially fantasy football for video games. We take turns. We pick games until we both have 10 games on each team. And at the end of the year, we add up their Metacritic average, and whoever has the highest score total from the 10 games wins.
That's cool.
And what we've discovered playing it for the last several years is that a lot of times you get screwed. So you pick a game, the game gets delayed out of the year, and you end up getting 0 for that game, and it pretty much costs you the whole season.
Right.
So this year we instituted like 2 bench games, so we have 2 alternates this year that you can slide in. But I've become very cautious when we play because I'm always the one who gets burned by the games getting pushed out of that year. So this year I picked Days Gone. I'm like, it's been in development for 7 years. It's been shown at trade show after trade show. I'm like, it has got to be one of the safest picks to come out this year, and no.
I heard some weird things about it like over the years. Like I heard at one point that it was split into 2 games, and then I heard that that's not true anymore. Then I heard I don't really, and I have some pretty knowledgeable sources.
When you hear stuff like that, that there's problems going on.
I don't know what's going on with it, but but I wish them the best. Like what I love about that studio is they're isolated in Oregon. They're not around anyone, so there's not like this hullabaloo about like in LA or San Francisco.
Yeah.
So they get to work in peace.
But that's
cool.
probably why it's taken them 7 freaking years.
Maybe. I trust in Shuhei and Scott Rhodey that they're probably getting that stuff straight, but I am worried about their long-term health, and I often wonder why they didn't try to shit out a siphon filter at some point or something too. But
yeah, another franchise.
That's neither here nor there.
Fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to our next topic. Actually, this one segues nicely into the next one. Big moves at Naughty Dog this week. Neil Druckmann was promoted from creative director to vice president. He's obviously been kind of the face of Naughty Dog now for probably, 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, he really came to prominence, some prominence with Uncharted 2, and then The Last of Us, obviously.
Yeah.
He came to prominence. I should be clear that he's a good personal friend of mine, so I'm super proud of him, but also you can take what I say about him with a grain of salt, because I have nothing but nice things to say about him. He's a really great guy. And
we're not here to criticize him.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is even nice things. Whatever I'm saying about him, I do know him, and he's a really sweet man and a smart guy.
He's a great guy.
I'm
not friends with him, but I've met him several times, and he's not what you would expect from someone who's been the face of Naughty Dog. Probably one of the top 3 most skilled development teams in the world.
Yeah.
I never would guess that if you met him. So he was promoted to vice president, deservedly so. He's been the face of the company for a long time. He's been a spokesman for the company and its games for a long time. Started as an intern just back in 2004.
Yeah, Jack 3, I think, was his first game.
Think about that. He went from intern in 2004 to vice president in 13 years.
Yeah, and not quietly either.
That is insane.
Yeah, he's a dynamo. And
it shows you the kind of guy he is. I mean, obviously he's a force there, and they know better than we do what he's done there. So the fact that he's moved up the chain so quickly there shows what he's been doing behind the scenes and the impact that he has had on their output. But my question is, and what we want to discuss is, how is this going to affect Naughty Dog? Because obviously he's one of those guys that kind of has his fingers in every pie, and he kind of helps shape the overall. He's kind of like Miyamoto at Nintendo. He doesn't really work on one game.
Right.
He works kind of like on all of them. He walks around, he sprinkles his magical dust on each project, and all of them, it kind of makes all boats rise, so to speak. And he's kind of been doing that for a while at Naughty Dog. Now that he's kind of an executive, do you worry that Naughty Dog's quality might suffer a little bit?
I don't worry about it with The Last of Us 2 because he's still in the creative director role for that.
Right.
I am curious, especially with Bruce being gone now, that and with Amy obviously gone, Justin Richmond's gone.
Yeah.
So like the leadership structure there is a little bit amorphous and kind of in flux. And I do worry about, I don't know if worried is, have they ever given us a reason to worry? Not really. But every game is
But they always had those people in the stable to calm any fears.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll be curious to see how it goes after that. They've worked, they tried a 2-team structure when they were doing Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us at the same time. That obviously didn't work out very well. And I don't think that he's a guy that wants to be working on different projects. He wanted to and he was supposed to go from The Last of Us to The Last of Us 2. Uncharted 4 was given to them because it had to be given to them, and that obviously put The Last of Us 2 a little bit behind and stuff like that. And they did a great job with what they had with Uncharted 4 and kind of reworked some things. So he has a lot to be proud of there. But what he does have, knowing him personally, is taste. And
absolutely.
And and there is not. I don't want to say there's a dearth of taste in the industry, because that's not true, but there's a lot of people that don't have any taste.
No, you're right.
And like don't know what's good and don't know what's bad. And he knows
that's
what's
why there's
good.
so many bad games.
He knows what's good. And so if he can, like you were saying, sprinkle that dust as a VP under Evan and that kind of in that structure and nurture these new guys that are coming up, because there are some, Kurt, there's, Kurt there and a few other guys that are really doing a great job in leadership positions of themselves on various departments. So if he can nurture them and bring them up like others brought him up, then there's something special going on over there. I mean,
Now, look, you said Uncharted 4 you're not a huge fan of.
I think I personally,
some of the guys who are stepping up into the roles that he is vacating are guys from that team.
Right, but you have to remember, so I've told this story before, right, that when I did the history of Naughty Dog, which was this big piece I did, like 50,000 words or something like that, I was talking to Amy, and I was outside her office waiting for her. She was on the phone or something. I was leaning against the wall. And I turn around. This was before Uncharted 4 was announced. This was before PlayStation 4 was announced. And it was Uncharted 4's storyboard, like the whole thing, like Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5, or whatever. And I recognize some of those, like I remember one of the cards said Scotland, which is in Uncharted 4 at the end, right?
Yeah.
But what they had to do was come in with a half-finished story. A lot of the stuff was done. And they had to figure out how to put it back together in a way that was cohesive and coherent and rewrite things and bring... Remember, what was that guy's name? Todd Stashwick or whatever was originally in the game or something like that. He was removed. So they were given something...
Also, Amy left kind of mid-development cycle.
Right, exactly. So they were given... I don't hold Uncharted 4 against Bruce and Neil at all. First of all, it's a great game by itself. It's just compared to their other games. But I give them a lot of credit because they were given a puzzle box with puzzle pieces, but half the puzzle was already done.
Yeah.
And they had to figure out how to finish it, right? And that's hard. It would have probably been way easier for them to start from scratch, and the game probably would have been better, but they weren't able to do that. So I'm confident, if this was happening at a mid-tier studio or a studio that had some duds, I mean, when's the last time Naughty Dog had a dud? On the Genesis?
I don't know.
Rings of Power?
Ever, really.
Crash Team Racing?
I mean, a total dud. Like, Crash Team Racing was brilliant.
I don't know. It's just like, when's the last time? Like, they were making PC games in the 80s. They were making Genesis games in the 90s. When's the last time they made a bad game? When's the last time they made a mediocre game?
You're right. A lot of people have come and gone in that amount of time.
It's the
people
culture.
Who are probably Neil Druckmann back in that era. They've had that guy move on and go somewhere else, and they've managed to find the talent to replace it.
It's the culture, right? And it's...
Well, I think everybody wants to work there.
Yeah,
maybe not long-term, because, I mean... A lot of people that I've talked to that have worked there, they like working there and they like the people, but they all say it's like a grind.
Oh, yeah.
And that if they had to work their entire career there, they'd be like, just shoot me. But the fact that they can go in and work on maybe 1 or 2 Naughty Dog games and then parlay that into a higher position, maybe another development studio, obviously you're taking that culture along with you as well. And so if you worked at Naughty Dog, it's probably very easy to get a job somewhere else.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, people go and Justin Richmond, who directed Uncharted 3, went and is in a leadership position at Riot, which is actually right across the street from Naughty Dog. But it's like, the way I look at it is, imagine if Salinger wrote more than just, in terms of novels, like well-known novels, more than Catcher in the Rye, right?
Yeah.
And someone's like, you gotta make a book better than this now, 2 years later. And then he did it. And then they're like, now you gotta make a book better than that one. And they do it. And then you're like, now you got to make a better book than that. And so on. That's why people...
That's not a fair comparison.
Whether it's Harper Lee or one of these guys, I think it's personally the reason why people don't endeavor to follow things up, because they're not able to do it. Naughty Dog did it.
But books and games are different, because with games you have an easier opportunity to make something better just because of technology. Technology is always improving. So you always have a better graphics engine. You have a better API. You have better middleware you can use to make a game. With a book, it's always a typewriter or a pen and ink, and then it's all on you.
Right.
So I get the analogy that you're making, but video games are very unique in that way. Like music, to an extent, movies, certainly, the technology improves and it makes it easier. You can do a lot more stuff in CG today than you could do 20 years ago when the original Jurassic... I mean, have you watched the original Jurassic Park?
Not in the last 15 years, probably.
But if you watch it now, you're like, wow, I can't believe I thought that looked good back then. So with anything that has technology involved, you do have advantages as time goes on because everything gets easier. Everything's a lot more automated as it goes on. I mean, that's why you don't really see a lot of completely and utterly bad games now. It's because middleware has got to a point where any jabroni can pretty much make a game that looks and plays decently. Now it's really up to like the art side of games,
Sure.
which is the secret sauce that not everyone has. And that's something that Naughty Dog has always had. And Naughty Dog is very good at reloading the gun and recruiting people who are going to fall in line and sort of keep that aesthetic going in the next generation of employees at the studio. So for me, anytime you look at a studio that has a track record like Naughty Dog, you always wonder, what is that cog? What is that secret sauce? And for Nintendo, it has been Miyamoto for a long time. And so I wanted to talk about this to just maybe try to suss out whether or not Druckmann might be that guy. And now that he's moving on to more of a supervisory role, if that might have any kind of an impact on the studio.
Yeah, I personally think it has every potential to have a positive impact. Because there's other talented people there. Yeah. I think one of the things, from my understanding of talking to him and knowing him, is I think he kind of feels bad that it seems like he made The Last of Us by himself, and he's not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I think this almost fits his personality, where it's like 150 people worked on this game, and he wants them to get their credit. He wants them to get their due. It's not him. He didn't do it all.
No, he's very humble.
Yeah, he is. So I think this actually kind of fits him, and I think the pressure is backbreaking to have to be a creative director on, The Last of Us 2, which is the follow-up to very easily one of the great games of all time. Yeah. That's a hard thing to do. Yep. So I give him a lot of credit. I'm very proud of him.
All right. Well, we'll see. Last of Us 2, probably next year?
Yeah, I would say May or June 2019.
Yeah, that's what it's kind of looking like. A lot of people are saying maybe this year.
No way.
Well,
I can 100% guarantee it's not coming out
they
this
did
year.
go on the Game Awards and accept like most anticipated game.
Right.
Which I think made a lot of people wonder if the game was coming out this year. But the caveat with that is that for whatever reason, that award at the Game Awards isn't like most anticipated game of next year.
Right, just most anticipated game.
It's just most anticipated game, period.
It reminds me of No Man's Sky when that won over and over again.
I think a lot of people don't realize that. Yeah.
Well, it's just, I told people in 2016, 2017, when I'm like, the game's coming out in 2019. The game's coming out in 2019. It's going to
be like the last game. It's going to be one of the best last games for that PlayStation platform.
I agree. Remember that The Last of Us, the original one, came out June 2013. 5 months later, we got PS4. I think it's going to be a similar thing.
And they'll end up doing the same thing. They'll release it on PS4 and PS5. Right. And they'll double dip and get the sales from both platforms. And
that's the fun thing, is that I don't think people realize that PS5 games are in development. They have been for a while now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And PS5, I think, fall 2019. I think it's...
Well, Dave, the rumor we were talking about on the show last week, dev kits are out there now for PS5. I mean, and they've actually been out there
for a while.
Now people finally had the guts to be like, yeah, we have one.
I think it was last fall that I heard that someone told me, like, for the first time, like, we are working on a game for the console. So
not that dev kits even matter anymore.
No,
you're basically just developing for a PC anyway.
Exactly.
Now you know what the limits are, and that's pretty much all that matters. It's not like back in the day with the cell processor, or when you had like custom chips from like some company put into the N64, or you have like ATI building the Dolphin processor for that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
It's all just NVIDIA off-the-shelf parts that you're just building a PC that can fit in a small form factor.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they come up with and when and how they announce it. I assume the announcement will be Q1 2019 or something like that, maybe even E3 or something like that. And then because they revealed PS4 in Manhattan in February of 2013, which was cool but weird. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. Like, I think because of the economic recession, the last generation was extended. I think people forget that generations usually last 5 to 6 years, not 7 or 8 or 9 years. And I know that the interstitial consoles, with Xbox One X and with PS4 Pro, like, kind of confuse people, but I think that's just them testing the waters. I wouldn't even be surprised if the new consoles were modular in some way, but we have to kind of see, like, what will...
No, I've had this idea for a long time of consoles and people thought I was crazy when I brought it up like a year and a half ago. Literally, where you can just buy a graphics card to snap into your console. And it's just like every 2 years they put out another graphics card that's in like a form factor that makes it look fun or whatever, but it's just like you have this console that you can upgrade. You snap in a new graphics card, you snap in a new processor. Whether it'll happen or not, I don't know. It was a crazy idea I had, but
it seems like a nice idea. Maybe a little complicated for the normal consumer, but remember that N64 had an expansion
compatible,
pack.
right? But everything's backwards compatible now. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's no more confusing than Xbox One X and Xbox One S and Xbox One.
Right.
I mean, we're already there, Colin.
Xbox One was the confusing name.
We are already there. Yeah, and what's the Xbox 2? Is that still going to be? I don't know.
I don't know what the hell they're going to do.
They should just call it Xbox and just call it PlayStation and just make everything backwards compatible forever back to these current machines.
That would be nice.
And
just put trophies on PS1 Classics
wins.
and I'll be a happy camper.
There you go. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to talk next about a game that Colin's been playing. Anytime we have guest hosts on the show, we like to get topics or games that they're actually playing and they're excited about. I don't know if you're excited about this one, though. It's the Secret of Mana remake.
Yeah.
Now, the game's been out for a while. You've been playing the living crap out of it.
Yeah, I've been playing it on Vita in quiet moments. It's just bad.
Oh, look, yeah, so the reviews have been terrible. Like,
Yeah.
It really got raked over the coals. Were they right? Because in some cases, the overall opinion of a game isn't necessarily always correct.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I don't think Secret of Mana was ever very good.
Wow.
And it's this, we have these goggles, what we look back on the SNES era with the RPGs, right? And there are great RPGs on the SNES where we're talking about Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI, where we're talking about Lufia, where they were talking about the Quintet and Enix games that kind of had RPG or sim elements like ActRaiser, Secret of Evermore, all of these kinds of games, right? There's a lot of good games. And Secret of Mana is a good game. But it was always kind of looked at as this pinnacle role-playing game on a console that had plenty of role-playing games. Now, I think PS1 had a better catalog of role-playing games, but I respect the Super Nintendo's catalog. And what I'm thinking now, playing this for the first time since the 90s, in this new...
Did you really like it back in the 90s?
I liked it, but even back then, I'm like, I don't really get why... It's fine. It's fun. I think about other Squaresoft games at the time. I think about its contemporaries even on Genesis with Phantasy Star and stuff like that. And I'm like, this game doesn't hold a candle to any of those. And
Phantasy Star is a pretty high bar.
And when I look at this game and I'm playing it now without the mystique of the 16-bit kind of graphics and stuff like that, and this kind of garbage 3D art, and the control scheme sucks. The game crashes constantly. I've never had a Vita game crash even once or twice. This game's crashed.
You've never had a Vita game crash?
Not what I'm saying is regularly. A game will crash once or twice, but I play extensively on Vita. I've never had a game run like this on a Vita ever.
Gotcha.
This is a game from a big publisher. This isn't a game from Idea Factory.
But did you notice that they announced this and literally like 3 or 4 months later it was released?
Yeah, and I think it's a port of maybe an iOS game or something, because they're playing around a lot with. They did it with Tactics. They just did it with Final Fantasy V, I think, and 6, which is really a horrifying thing to think about. But it made me just think in my mind, was this game ever as good as people talked about it? And I think the answer is no. And because
how much could a remake alter the overall quality of the original game? It's not helping.
It's not helping.
It's not going to change the story. It's not going to change the writing. It's not going to change the character development. All things that are very important in any RPG. It's probably not going to change the combat system, although we'll talk about a remake a little later on in the show where maybe that is the case.
Right.
But in this case, it didn't. It's not going to change the battle system, the magic system. So maybe you're onto something here. Maybe this is just one of those games that for whatever reason established some kind of a cult following and people just kind of piled on and lifted it up to heights that it didn't deserve to reach.
Yeah, I think that people just... Listen, it's all subjective. Like, if people love that game, that's totally great. But what do they call the series in Japan? Seiken Densetsu or something like that? Final Fantasy Adventure, the first one on Game Boy that was recently remade like a year or so ago for Vita and other consoles. I think Vita, maybe PS4. It even struck me then. I'm like, this isn't as good as I remember it. And when I go back and play other old games that I love, we mentioned ActRaiser, or I'm a huge old Mega Man fan, Castlevania fan. Those games hold up and are brilliant to this day. So when I put that, the other thing though, is it's just a reliance on this cheap graphical look that sucks, and it just removes.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it at all. Look at the game.
It removes like a vacuum. The aesthetic, the spirit, and the story, and the feeling, the immersion of these beautiful pixelated graphics that forced you to use your imagination a little bit. I look at this, I'm like, look at this right now. Like, this looks like shit.
It really does. Yeah, when I first saw it, look at that. That is so ridiculous.
It looks, the game, I remember Secret of Mana being way darker than this, way more moody. Like, what is this?
Wait, roll that back, Sam, that dude's face when he walks across there. The guy's like,
Like, why couldn't they just take Secret of Mana and just re-release it?
Well, I think you actually touched on something there that I think is very important, is that when you look at games from the 8-bit and the 16-bit era, a lot of those games, your mind is filling in the blanks. You're allowing your imagination to control what your mind's eye sees. And I mean, you go back to even the Atari 2600, and what was kind of filling in the blanks for you in a lot of cases was like the instruction manual, the art on the instruction manual, or the box art. Because the games are so crude that you have to kind of wonder, what does this really look like? And a lot of times, the actual that character is so bad. A lot of times the manifestation of what the developer comes up with when you try to upgrade something like this falls well short of what was in your mind's eye back when you were 11 years old playing this epic RPG.
Absolutely. And I think that it's people ask me, what do you think is the most atmospheric game of all time, or immersive game? And I'm like, I think Castlevania 2 is. Yeah. Because it's I love Dead Space, I love Resident Evil 4, Outlast and all these kinds of games, great atmospheric games, but that was a game that was scary as shit, because you had this horrifying box art, you're gathering Dracula's body parts to put him back together to kill him again. Yeah. And you're kind of just skulking around as a day-night cycle. There's this kind of morbid Eastern European kind of aesthetic. And I like that kind of stuff where I don't feel like technology has necessarily always benefited video games. And that game couldn't run on a Super Nintendo that way, but God, it shouldn't run on a Super Nintendo that way.
So you're telling everyone to steer clear of this, no matter how rose-colored, rose-tinted your glasses are classic JRPGs, stay away.
The original Secret of Mana, I think, is on the SNES, that they just released, right? The one with all the... So, if you really want to play it, that one's got to be better. I haven't played it. I haven't played it in many years, but it's got to be better than this.
Why did you stick with it so long? Just because you kept waiting, okay, at some point this is gonna break, or...
I have this, we've mentioned it many times, this OCD in me, where I also don't like sinking my trophies and having 8%. Oh, geez. So I'm just gonna get 100% and get done with it. But like you said, there's also nothing to play. There's plenty to play, I guess, if I looked, but
nothing.
I'm in wait and see mode, So the second Ni no Kuni comes. Maybe it's arrived when I've been gone.
A little gift when you get home.
I'll throw my fucking Vita out the window. So
you're definitely not going to do that.
No.
I know you love the Vita more than anyone I've ever met.
I would never treat the Vita with such disrespect. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about E3.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Microsoft at E3 this year, but I think that's going to lead into a bigger discussion of what's going on with the show. So Microsoft announced this week that it's kind of following suit and actually following in the footsteps of EA a little bit, and it's basically taking its presence off of the show floor to LA Live. Its press conference is going to happen there. Most of its big events are going to happen there. Most of the kiosks that you play are going to be there. And instead, what's going to be left on the show floor is a Mixer booth. For those of you who don't know, Mixer is Microsoft's answer to Twitch. We don't stream on Mixer. Obviously, we're streaming on Twitch. And basically, it's a place where you go, and I'm sure there's going to be influencers in there streaming away in the Mixer booth. But Microsoft, yet another huge publisher that has decided to leave the E3 show floor. Colin, how do you feel about this? First of all, how did you feel about when EA made that decision? How do you think that's all kind of shook out? And now, how do you feel about one of the big three leaving the show floor?
Well, it's significant that it's a hardware manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I think that,
especially when you just launched the X.
Yeah, exactly. It's a harbinger of things to come for E3. E3 I fucking hate E3.
Really?
I hate it. I think I've been to 12 of them or something like that. And it was always the bane of my existence, because it doesn't focus on what I think makes video games good and fun, which is nuance and spending time with the game and studying it and anticipating it. Instead, it's just lines of people, way too many people, and now they've opened it to the public, so it's even worse. I can't even imagine going to it anymore. And so I like that big publishers are moving and shaking and kind of, shirking what you might think was their responsibility almost to be there, to kind of prop up the gaming industry.
There is kind of a little bit of a responsibility to the ESA.
Yeah, and to its partners.
In the industry at large, kind of to be there for the biggest show of the year?
Sure. If I were a third party, if I were an Activision, a UB, or something like that, where half of our games or 40% of our games are being sold on that platform, I'd question that. But I think it's part
I didn't even think about that angle, the third-party angle.
Yeah, I mean, it's essential that they work in a symbiotic way, right? But I think there's too many shows. You know, I've heard this from my PR friends. Like, there's too many shows. They don't know what the hell to do. Like, look at PSX even this year, right? PlayStation Experience had no press conference because they don't know what they're supposed to do. Because they were at E3.
You run out of stuff after a while.
Exactly right. They were at E3, they were at Paris, they were at Tokyo. Eventually, there's only so many games.
Yeah.
And how many times do you need to see them and want to see them? And I think trotting them out over and over again for you to play hands-on at PAX, hands-on at E3, hands-on at Gamescom, hands-on at Paris, it's like enough already, you know? And so I think this is a trend towards smaller presences at more intimate presences off. You know, I don't want to be a dick about E3 specifically. I know people are excited to go, and I know that it's exciting for people that aren't in the industry or have small blogs or whatever to go. But it's not really a show for you, right? And so if it loses its meaning in that way to get press and people from around the world to get hands-on to kind of proliferate that information, which is becoming less and less of, then I wonder if E3 is even going to exist for much longer. Because
you realize this past year was my 20th E3.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane.
Just to date myself
Did you go to the one in Atlanta?
I did. That was my first one.
I love that there was one. And obviously the notorious Santa Monica one.
Yeah, that was 2007. 7 or 6?
6 or 7. I think it was 7 because I think it was the first year I was at E3 or at IGN.
But my point was that people have said this so many times. Like, that's it. E3's done. After the one in Santa Monica, people were like, it's over. Oh my gosh, this is E3 now? Like, this can't carry on like this.
But they did respond.
It's like a cockroach, though. Yeah. I don't think it will die.
I don't know that maybe dying is a little morbid, but maybe I'm wrong on that in that sense. But remember, we used to have Kensha Hall. We used to have a huge middle ground at E3. E3 used to be way bigger than it is now. And I think people kind of lost sight of that as well. We have the 2 halls, but there used to be a bunch of shit in the middle,
in between,
and there used to be stuff on all the floors, like in the concourse. It's not that anymore. And especially in my post IGN years when I went a few times, it seemed to me to be kind of a shell of its former self. Big publishers are taking up way more space because there's way more empty space. There is empty space on the floor now.
Absolutely. Well, there's going to be a big hole now.
Yeah, Microsoft and Sony used to be right next to each other. I think it's super smart in this always connected era where people are watching streams, where people like influencers, where they trust people like you or I or whoever they trust. Maybe they don't trust us, but they trust someone.
Somebody, yeah.
You don't really need these shows anymore. Like I really think
we don't go to the press conferences. Like
oh my God,
I literally went to every E3 press conference for the first 14 years E3 existed. I haven't gone to one now in like 4 years because there's no reason. It's like, why would I go and sit in a theater where there's people talking, there's noise, and I can't do anything? Instead, we come here, we sit and we stream and we watch E3 with our fans, with our users, with our subscribers. It's more fun for me. It's more rewarding for them. They feel like more of a part of it instead of just sitting there watching a screen by themselves. And I think a lot of that has to do with how kind of covering games has morphed and evolved over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But as a journalist, I feel very little reason to go there. It's like we used to go there, we'd watch the press conference, we'd walk up to the stage with our crew, we'd stand around for like 2 hours waiting to do an interview with someone like Scott Rohde, who is busy, obviously. And he finally comes out an hour after the time we're supposed to interview him, and everyone's angry because we have to go to the next press conference or whatever. There's no reason to do that anymore. Because all you're getting is just a repeat of what they just said on stage. It's like you just need this guy we had a TV show on Spike, so sometimes we just have that stuff so we can run it on the show so we have a more personal touch instead of just showing highlights of the press conference. But if you don't do that stuff, there's very little reason to be there. Yeah, I agree. And I think that, it's something else that I feel about it, too, that E3 is emblematic of, these other shows are emblematic of. I went to Gamescom a few times, just horrifying. Tokyo Game Show, horrifying. But Tokyo Game Show once upon a time was a really good experience. It's cool for me because I love Japanese games. You talk about a shell of its former self. Oh, it's sad over there now. Tokyo Game Show isn't even a shell of its former self. No, it's very sad. The last one I went to was very sad. I think that was 2014, so I can't even imagine how sad it was. I went in 2012, and by then it was already, we had brought a crew of 7 people, and after the second day, we're all like, what do we do now? I just went and spent a lot of money at Super Potato. Yeah, like everybody does. Yeah. But I hate the preview cycle. I think previews are disingenuous. I think publishers are predatory with previews. And I think E3 is symbolic of that because it's a whole massive 3-day preview cycle, right? And previewing games is bullshit. I often bring up, it's cool to anticipate to watch gameplay, to go hands-on. All that kind of stuff's great.
But when you're seeing these vertical slices of games that are not representative of the rest of the game by design, it starts to become, like I said, predatory. And I think about
like Fool's Gold.
I think about two somewhat recent examples. When I saw Knack, which is horrifyingly bad.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. It has its fans, though.
I saw the game and played the game many times before it came out, right? And it was awesome. And I was like, oh, this game's going to be great. Like, they showed, like, little tight pieces of the game where I'm like, oh, the mechanic.
So they fooled you, essentially.
Exactly, and I felt like an asshole because I felt like I didn't mean...
Because then you go out and report that.
Exactly, and I didn't feel like I didn't mean to mislead you. I don't think I did based on what I saw, but you kind of feel like an asshole, right?
Yeah.
And then the Order 1886, the other side of the coin. I went and saw the game. It looked horrible. It was running like shit. I came out of the preview event. I was like, this game is going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. Everyone got mad at me. Everyone told me I was wrong, and I was totally right about it. So previewing is a thing where you can't win, right? And I like the idea of us collectively not feeding into this hype cycle, this pre-order cycle, this buy, you must have, you must want, you need it. I think that these kinds of things contribute to that, and I don't understand why anyone would want to participate in that cycle. So I'm so glad, at least from my perspective, where I can just pick and choose what I want to do and not have to be there on the ground anymore and preview games and kind of hold my nose knowing that I'm sitting in this theater at some publishers, behind closed doors, some publishers seeing exactly what they want me to see, not letting me touch the controller, not showing me anything. Oh, the game crashes, I won't do that when it comes out kind of shit.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm a little pessimistic in that way, but I think we have to grow up as an industry a little bit. And I think this is a vestige of the 90s to me. And,
no, I'd agree with that, but don't you think that just for the purposes, the nuts and bolts of doing the job, that it's much easier just to have everything in one big building? Because look, now you have the convention center, you have the two halls there, then you have EA over here doing its thing, you have Microsoft over here doing its thing, and granted, they're not that far away, it's a couple blocks, but that's a lot of time. And most people, when they book their E3 appointments, I don't have to do this anymore, but back in the GT days, it's like every one of our editors was booked from the minute he walked on the show floor until the minute the show floor closed. He had one appointment every hour all day with a crew, and he went and he did all his appointments, then he came back and brought all the tapes back with him, blah, blah, blah. It was this process. But when you have these disparate locations scattered all over downtown Los Angeles, it kind of interrupts the flow and the scheduling of actually covering the show. And I feel like in a lot of ways, these publishers leaving the show floor, it's a lot of bit selfish. It's not just selfish talking about the journalists who are hustling trying to cover this. It's also selfish when you talk about the industry. It's like the industry needs EA and Microsoft to be at E3. This is the one time out of the year where we get national coverage on mainstream outlets. It's when Yahoo finally talks about the video game industry. It's when all the big news outlets, the CNNs, all those finally show up and talk about video games. And when you start pulling the best stuff out of, and look, this is one of the 3 platform holders we're talking about here. Start pulling that stuff up out of the show, suddenly the show isn't such a spectacle anymore, and it's just kind of this shell of its former self with a lot of open space, and I feel like maybe E3 starts letting more fans in.
Yeah, maybe. And
this could be kind of the death knell here, like the thing that makes it start cycling down the drain until it just turns into another PAX.
Or Gamescom, which is what you definitely don't want, because that show's horrific.
It is. It's hard to cover.
And it's... I don't know. From my perspective, again, just from my opinion, it's not right or wrong, and other people are going to feel differently. I think it's like Microsoft leaving is like drawing the curtain back and showing an emptiness that I think has always kind of been there anyway. What could they do to get why don't they just send people builds? Why does everyone have to be so have a debug kit? Like everyone has a fucking debug kit. Just send them the games.
You don't even need debug kits.
Yeah, now you don't, because now you can get Sony with PS4 started putting their previews even on the PSN. So these shows exist because publishers want to control everything. They don't want to relinquish anything. And remember back in the day, they don't really do this anymore, but you were there back in the day when it's like, oh, you want to see a game? You're going to go to Sweden. You want to see a game? You got to go to Mexico. And it's like,
no, there were times where you had to go to Italy to review Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no, just send me the disc. I got 5 debugs sitting in my office.
But that's the thing is it's a half step, right? Because that doesn't happen anymore. Because everyone's enough already. We have other things to do.
They still do have events like that.
It's not anywhere near the way it used to be.
No, you're right. You're right.
Not even maybe 5% of what it used to be.
And I think the funny part too is that a lot of people used to look at games journalists and think that we were bought off or they were jealous because we got to go. That we didn't like doing this.
No,
stuff.
I hated it. And can you blame the audience for thinking that when they're
No,
putting you
not
up
really.
at? I remember playing Kingdoms of Amalur, I think, at the Cosmopolitan in Vegas, which is I love Vegas. I go there all the time. But one of the great hotels there,
Yeah.
they put you up
The
for
best,
4 days.
probably, hotel.
Yeah, and it's like, and they give you your own. And I'm like, you literally could have saved yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars, but also just sent me the game. And so
That's
I think
with Control that you were talking about
It's
earlier,
awful.
though.
It's
Well, I don't
horrible.
know if you ever went to any of the Call of Duty review events that they used to have.
no, that wasn't my game.
Where they would put everybody up at like a golf course or whatever with like and you'd stay in hotel rooms, and they would go there like a week and a half beforehand, wire up all the rooms with Ethernet, and you would play the single player campaign in your room. You come in, it was very guarded. The console will be locked with the steel case with the lock on the front.
It's absurd.
And they'd be like, so you have today to play the campaign, and then the next 2 days you would go into this big room where they had everything wired up to play multiplayer. And I remember we came back from one we were doing a show called Invisible Walls at the time, and I came back and I talked about how I was in Ojai at this event, and they flew us in a helicopter from LA, Santa Monica Airport, in a helicopter up to Ojai. I got like sick in the helicopter, and I was like, dude, like, just let me drive there. Like, I really don't want to fly in this rickety military helicopter up. It was nice to see the coast when I wasn't like trying to keep my lunch in my stomach or
Right.
whatever. But I think the perspective of a lot of people who haven't done this is, oh, that curries favor for that game. But I think what it is if at least when you're dealing with more experienced journalists, it did not curry favor for that game at all.
No.
You're putting me, in my opinion, in a non-ideal situation to play these games. And Call of Duty and Activision were great because you'd sit down, you literally had like a 5.1 system set up around your little couch in your hotel room. But a lot of times that's not the case. You go to these review events and you're sitting at a kiosk and there's 10 dudes lined up beside you at a kiosk, and it's really hot in the room because like all this gear is on and the AC can't keep up. It wasn't helping anybody, in my opinion. And you're right, in a lot of ways, the readers or the viewers or the fans or whatever of various publications would be like, wait, what's going on there? That's a little shady.
Yeah,
You can't
I
really
don't blame
blame
them.
them
I
for
don't blame
saying
them.
that.
No.
Even though you know that it was the exact opposite of it. You
That's-
can't blame them for thinking that somehow that was currying favor.
Absolutely, and I've said many times, like, I was in a senior position at the biggest gaming website in the world for a long time, and nothing ever untoward ever happened. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just straight up saying, I'm just straight up saying that, like, it never happened.
Yeah.
But what I often said was, all it required, like when you go to a review event, I'm sure it's still the case today, there might be like 50 outlets there, right? But the publisher doesn't really give a shit about any of those outlets, except for like maybe 7 or 8 of them, right?
No, you're right.
If 7 or 8 of those outlets were just like, we're not going, then they would stop doing it.
No, you're right.
If IGN and GameSpot and Kotaku and whoever else were like, we're not doing this anymore, like, then they would stop doing it because little blog with 10,000 views is being brought over to be cool, like so they look cool, but
the
they don't care.
influencers do muddy the waters a little bit. Because
Well, the ethics are a little different with those guys.
right, their ethics are different. They have nobody. There's no checks and balances. No one looking over their shoulder. I've talked about YouTubers a million times on a million shows. I'm not a fan of how the editorial works with those guys, but we're talking about the angle of they want those people to be there. And if we decide, or the top 7 traditional publications decide not to go, those influencers are going to go.
They're going to go, but you have to understand, YouTube and Twitch and the influencers of new podcasting and all that kind of stuff, they're going to eat those sites' lunch eventually anyway. So it's a matter of just how they're slowly nibbling away at it, but maybe they'll eat it a little quicker. But it was just a thing I thought of when I was at IGN when this wasn't quite as crazy as it is now, where I'm like, I remember when we would have to figure out like who's going to go cover this game, and you just see the person's face drop. Like,
Yeah. I gotta go again.
Like the only advantage of being senior there, well, there's many advantages, I guess, but one of the great advantages was like eventually I just didn't have to do it anymore.
Right.
You know, I'm just like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing this anymore. And
truth be told, a lot of the green people who are on your staff, they're excited at first.
yeah, at first. Yeah.
Because
Then they get broken.
they would be jealous at first. They're like, you're always the one going on these trips and blah, blah, blah. And then you come back and you said you didn't have a good time or whatever. And then it finally comes to the point where you're like, okay, I can start delegating this to them. They're excited the first 5 or 6. Like the third time they have to go to like Dallas or Portland or one of these towns, they're like, I get it now. Now I understand why you were never excited to go on these things.
Yeah, the only advantage is like you live on a company card basically while you're gone. So you're basically living for free. So there's an advantage to that. But yeah, no, I agree. I just think we have to restructure the industry to, I think, be a little more intimate and a little more transparent and kind of let go of these old legacy. Just because E3 existed doesn't mean it needs to exist today.
No, you're right.
And I
You're absolutely
really
right.
do feel like it doesn't. These shows, are cannibalizing each other, and until everyone can agree that we only need like maybe one of these a year and not 5 or 6 or 7 or what we're getting now, which is like a convention in every town with 100,000 people or more. There's going to be like a convention in Flint, Michigan, and Daly City, California soon. You know, it's like what, like why?
Well, there's a PAX in every quadrant of the United States now, and now there's going to be one in Europe. Now that the parent company of PAX bought Eurogamer and US Gamer. They're going to take over EGX. I'm sure that's going to become PAX Europe or whatever.
Dude, and I'm not trying to, like, again, I'm an old man now. I sound like an old curmudgeonly man, and I am. But I understand, like, for gamers, this is a way for them to meet other gamers. This is a way for them to buy merch.
I love PAX. I think PAX is awesome.
PAX is cool, but again, it's way better than like the traditional conventions. But to me, I'm just like, this doesn't define us. This doesn't define us. We're letting this stuff define us, but it doesn't have to define us. What should define us is our individual tastes, our ability to talk about games, to think about games, to treat them like the art form they deserve to be treated as. And I think these shows are commercial exercises. And as you know, I love the market. I am a conservative. I have no problem with that. But I don't know. I've always had a problem with it because it's just buy, look, pre-order, play, and I'm like, it's dehumanizing us in a way, and I don't like it. So
to bring it back around to kind of wrap up the topic.
What the hell was the topic?
It's Microsoft leaving the E3 show floor.
We're rambling.
So do you think that this will have big repercussions?
Yes.
On down the line?
Because
look, EA's one thing. One of the big three, one of the platform holders leaving is something else entirely. Because this could be a domino that just sends a bunch of other dominoes toppling.
Well, do you want to be... Think about, for people that don't know E3's layout, when you walk into West Hall, there's usually like IGN, GameSpot, and a few, like Atlas is usually up front for some reason.
Yeah.
And then if you go back, then Sony dominates the back and Microsoft dominates kind of the left.
Yeah.
And so now there's going to be nothing there. There's going to be smaller publishers there. Maybe Sony will annex it or somebody else will take over. But eventually, if these things start whittling down, then do you really want to be there anymore? Because then it's not the cool place to be. I respect that Microsoft's doing this.
Well, you could look at it from that perspective, or you could look at it from the perspective of Sony and be like, hey, they're gone. We could make our booth bigger. We could make this whole hall PlayStation Hall, essentially. Nintendo, you go over to the other one. We got this one. You got the other one.
I think it's kind of... I personally don't think it's going to look... The reason the Sony layout that it is now, which is pretty extensive, it's like an L shape, is it's always crowded. It always looks like the hot place to be. Yeah. I just think that optics are going to be really important here, and you know, I think the original harbinger was Nintendo not doing press conferences for a while, and then I think EA leaving obviously was that, and it was the next one, and Microsoft leaving obviously with hardware now is important. But I respect that Microsoft's doing it, and I've said many times how much
you can't tell them how to run their business, right?
No, but I think I love that Microsoft is just doing a bunch of shit. Like, I'm not an Xbox fan. I want them to do well. I think it's great. I think they obviously stumbled. I think the Xbox One is obviously a pretty disappointing console, all told. But that Phil Spencer and all these guys are just doing their thing and making different choices and bold choices to get attention back onto their brand and to kind of turn the ship, I think is so cool. And I think this is actually similar to backwards compatibility, similar to the Game Pass with the first-party stuff, similar to all these things. Another reason to pay attention to them, to talk about them, to make it look like they're forward-thinking. And I think they might be more forward-thinking than their competitor. And we're going to see how that plays out, obviously, in the next 18 months, 2 years.
We'll see how many people want to make that trek down to LA Live. It's not that far, but...
No, but when it's 95 degrees out, it is.
It absolutely is. All right, let's move on to our next topic. We're going to talk about... not just Fortnite. We're going to talk about Fortnite a little bit, but the big story from Fortnite this week was, hey, we have a mobile version. Not only, hey, do we have a mobile version, but the mobile folks are going to be playing on the same servers as the people on the other platforms. Typically, mobile games are kind of cordoned off into their own servers where you play against other people who are on mobile and are using the same control interface you are. In this case, that's not what's happening. They're actually throwing mobile players onto servers with console players and PC players. So we want to talk about that briefly, but sure. I think the bigger discussion is cross-platform play. And is it as big a deal as people make it out to be? Rocket League is a game where a lot of people have kind of been up in arms over the fact that PlayStation has not played ball. In fact, across the board, really, PlayStation has not played ball with any of these games that we're hoping to build one unified player base across all platforms. Everyone else seems to be on board with it.
Yeah, Microsoft was on board with that.
Microsoft is on board with it.
They have to be, but yeah.
Yeah, they do have to be. Nintendo's on board with it. We're applicable, obviously. Not a lot of online games for Switch at this point.
Yeah, but which is incredible, Nintendo's not on board with anything.
Right.
Like, literally anything. You can say Nintendo, like, the sky is blue, and Nintendo be like, I don't think so.
I think it looks orange.
It's like... It's magenta.
It works for Nintendo, though.
Yeah, no.
In a lot of cases, it works for Nintendo to do that.
It's interesting. I think, first of all, obviously mobile players are going to be at a massive disadvantage.
Yeah, you would think.
And console players are already at a massive disadvantage against PC players. So it's strange. I think it's a way to kind of make this platform or Fortnite more ubiquitous, which is cool. And I'm more fascinated as someone who refuses to play online games. I don't play them.
Why do you refuse to play them?
Because I play games on my own. I play games to get away from everybody and everything. So,
Okay.
so that's always been my thing. I've never been intrigued by, even back in the day, Mario Kart on SNES or Mario Party.
You never liked multiplayer gaming.
Like there's a few examples. Obviously there's a few examples like that where
What's your favorite multiplayer game ever?
Rainbow Six 3 on Xbox.
Okay.
The original Xbox.
I'm there. I was there, dude.
I loved that
I
game.
played the living crap out of that.
That game just got me because I was a freshman in college when it came out. We had T1 connections in my dorm room, so I used to host games, and it was great. So, but typically I like to play. I mean, typically, almost always, I play games by myself. So I'm more fascinated watching this entirely new subgenre of shooter come up. That's sucking all the oxygen out of the industry, very similar to the way for a while mobile games seem to be sucking the oxygen out of the industry. And it's cool to watch from an economic standpoint because, not only with what is it, Player Unknown Battlegrounds and obviously Fortnite and how they're claiming that they're getting copied and all this, a lot of really fascinating stuff. I often say that the stories behind the games are more interesting than the games themselves. And this is one of those situations where I'm like, this is so cool watching this erupt.
Well, it's also crazy that the company that copied the original game, that game is doing far better than the original game at this point.
Yeah,
PUBG, as big as it was, it never hit that cultural inflection point that Fortnite has.
It's because they, as far as I understand, you know more about this than I do, I'm sure, is that wasn't it because they refused to do anything about the cheaters, they weren't releasing maps, the maps were too big?
Well, I think a big problem with PUBG at first was that it was an indie game, and it didn't have a big team working on it. And as it became a smash hit, they did a really good job of staffing up and kind of working really hard on getting patches out there. But it was really bumpy at first because they just didn't have as the money started coming in, they were smart and they did reinvest it into the studio so that they could get patches out and fix the game more quickly. But man, it's hard to compete with a studio like Epic.
Yeah, it might. The funny thing is it might not have been smart for them to do that.
I actually, by the way, I called this way before. As soon as I heard about Fortnite was aping Battle Royale, I'm like, PUBG's done. No, you're not going to be able to keep up with Epic. No matter how much money PUBG is making, not only are they not going to be able to hire fast enough, you can't just hire people and all of a sudden you're just cranking things out. It's like there's an assimilation period when you bring people into your studio. They have to learn how you work. They have to learn the tools that you're working on. They need to learn the chain of command, the chain of development and creation. And Epic's been there all along working on big games. And I just knew that as long as Fortnite's Battle Royale mode wasn't terrible out of the gate, that the path was paved for them to take over this genre, and that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Like I like this. It's so simple in its premise, which is something I like. It's not complicated. It doesn't really require, obviously inherently doesn't require teamwork, and so just as a commentator, let's say, someone who just watches, I love seeing this happen. And with what happened with Twitch the other night with Ninja and with Drake and all that,
yeah.
That's a cultural phenomenon.
That's
a bleed through that gaming I think needs. I think it's good for gaming.
But it's not just those guys either. I mean, if you follow a lot of athletes on Twitter or whatever, they're all playing it. They are all playing it. Like I'm a big Steelers fan. There's a young receiver named Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, he was in that game, wasn't he? He actually got into that game with Drake.
But you see, he's another one. He's just playing Fortnite. He goes out and buys a Fortnite toy, and then he goes out and shoots himself attacking people with his Fortnite toy, and then he puts it up on YouTube, and it does 5 million views. This stuff has never happened with PUBG. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the art style. Fortnite is a much more welcoming, T-rated game, whereas PUBG is a little grittier. You look at it, and you're like, okay, that game's probably more for an adult crowd than it is for the younger crowd. And if I was a parent, I would probably be okay letting my 12-year-old kid play Fortnite. PUBG, maybe not.
Right.
And I think that's helped it a lot. But I think the bigger discussion here is, what is the lesser of two evils when you're talking about cross-platform play? Is it better to have that wider audience so everyone can play your game, or is it better to make sure that the people who are playing are getting a more balanced experience so that they're not turned off by it?
I think it's the latter, personally. I think there's a lot said about this cross-platform play that seems cool, but I think it's actually going to cause massive problems. And certainly is going
to turn people off.
Yeah, it's going to cause massive problems with this. I mean, not enough where it's going to destroy the game because it's so popular, but think about a game that has out the gate a shooter of some sort, maybe with normal lobbies and all that kind of stuff, deathmatch or whatever, that's broken out of the gate because it's on Xbox One, PS4, and PC, and it kills the player base immediately. It's a risk, and I don't think it's a risk really worth taking. I think Sony's actually somewhat smart by not doing it, and because it protects your ecosystem, it protects quality.
Well, Sony's not playing along because it doesn't need to.
Yeah, they don't have to.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
It's
just, look, if PlayStation 5 comes out and the positions are swapped, then the position on this is going to swap. Suddenly Microsoft is like, we don't need cross-platform. And Sony will be like, look, we're the good guys. We'll do cross-platform. We'll allow everyone to play against our players.
I honestly think that this isn't even something. I think like cross-platform play is not even something that most gamers even care about, right? It reminds me of what we used to talk about with backwards compatibility, where everyone's like, why can't PS3 play PS2 games, the newer PS3? Or why can't PS4 play PS3 games? And they're like, well, that's cool, but no one cares. That's what they're saying is like, you think people care.
Well, if you look at the Wii, remember when the Wii launched, it was backwards compatible with the GameCube.
Right.
And then the later models of that, the first thing it ditched was the backwards compatibility.
Yeah, because you didn't need it. It's just extra money you have to spend that no one is buying a PS4 to play PS3 games.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to do that.
Well, going forwards, I don't think backwards compatibility is even going to be a thing because all these consoles are just going to keep playing the games from before at just a lower resolution or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, everything's going to scale now.
I agree.
And I do agree with you, too. I think it's more important to have a balanced experience because people will play a game and maybe play it a couple times. If they're getting their butt whooped, they stop playing. And you're right. Like, playing against any platform, playing against somebody with a mouse and keyboard is at a disadvantage when you're talking about shooters.
Yeah, no.
Think about an RTS or something like that. If they were ever to mix console players in with PC players, you'd have no chance.
You can't. And so these ecosystems should remain separate. I don't think we have to look at it as like a Venn diagram where there has to be massive crossover. We already get crossover because third-party games are on all these consoles, so that's about as good as you should get. By the way, you're a Steelers fan? I gotta go.
I'm a Pittsburgh across the board. I don't care about baseball, but
go Jets.
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about Yakuza 6. Now, have you played any of the Yakuza games?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
Nope.
Are you a Shenmue fan?
I played Shenmue back in the day. I don't know that I'd call myself a fan of it. But yeah, I think there's some we want to talk about rose-tinted glasses with a game, from my perspective.
No, I'm right there with you, actually.
But because isn't Shenmue 3 still in development? That's still a thing.
I think it's supposed to come this year. They're saying this year.
Man, oh man. Maybe it'll run on Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not games for me. But Greg, my old partner at Kind of Funny, huge Yakuza fan, so we used to talk about the games pretty often.
Yeah, well, I've been playing Yakuza 6. Reviews have just started trickling out. I think it comes out today, I believe, either today or Tuesday. I've been spending a ton of time with this game. I've been playing it for the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if I would call myself a Shenmue fan or not. I think I would say when Shenmue actually came out, I liked it because there was really nothing else like it. But I feel like if you play games now that are in that genre, it feels very dated. Very dated. But I still appreciate Shenmue because without Shenmue, you don't get a lot of the other stuff that came later, a lot of the open world, even a lot of the GTA stuff. I wonder if it would ever happen if it weren't for Shenmue in the first place.
Right.
I think the problem with Yakuza 6 is that it's still like Shenmue. And I think maybe somebody did go back and play Shenmue in the last year and really liked it. It's possible.
Right.
I think there may be a couple people at Easy Allies who are big fans of Shenmue. And maybe they would really like Yakuza. But here's the thing. Yakuza 6 feels like a game that was made back in 1999 or 2000, before all these innovations came to open world games. So you don't realize how much being able to shoot or drive cars adds to the genre until you go back and play a game like this that doesn't have that stuff. And I think it's been the same thing for me when I've gone back and tried to play the old Shenmue games. It's like, it just feels empty and boring. And this game, it has mini-games and melee combat and a crap ton of cinemas. I mean a crap ton of cinemas. And they're not cinemas where anything happens. They're cinemas where characters have conversations. And they're just sitting there. And it's like watching us, except for like 60 hours of just camera cuts from one face to the other.
Sounds thrilling.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of games have kind of solved that problem with sort of on-the-fly radio transmissions. Instead of having two characters sitting there just discussing something ad nauseum, they found ways to make it more integrated into the overall experience and less obtrusive. And with Yakuza 6, you don't have that option. You can skip the cutscenes, but you're not going to know what's going on with the story. And these cutscenes just go on forever and ever. And even though the writing, actually the translation in this game is one of the best translations I've seen in a really, really long time. The writing is really great. But you're just sitting there staring at these character models for literally 30 or 40 minutes at a time, where they go on these really long-winded conversations. And it just grinds the whole experience down to a halt. And then once you finally do get out of the cutscenes and you go out into the world, there's just, in comparison to games like Grand Theft Auto, there's just not that much to do. I would even argue that the earlier Yakuza games offered a lot more to do as far as mini games and things to actually do as you're kind of walking around Tokyo. This has like a karaoke game, a batting cage game. There's like a handful of stuff that you actually can do as like side, but they're very simple. There's not a lot of depth to them. It's very easy to master them very quickly. And then you're just left with this game where you kind of watch a bunch of cutscenes and then wander around the city and get in a fist fight. And the melee combat isn't particularly great or reliable or realistic or engrossing. I don't know. Its Metacritic average right now is sitting at an 83, and to me that seems pretty high.
That'll fall, I'm sure. All the the reviews will trickle out and probably will lower. But I'm more fascinated from a business perspective about kind of Sega and Sony kind of embracing on this franchise pretty heavily recently the last few years, where
Sony especially.
Yeah, like where it seems like these games sell, like obviously, and they're like giving them playtime. They seem to be churning Yakuza games out way quicker than I thought, which might be kind of what you're speaking about here. I feel like I feel God Almighty. I feel like there's been like 5 of them in the last like few years.
Well, see, what happened was they were being released in Japan all along and were not getting brought over to the West. So essentially, Sega had this backlog of Yakuza games that had already been out in Japan for a long time. So it started doing stuff like Kiwami, where calling them remakes maybe isn't fair. Even remasters is a bit of a stretch, I think. Port probably is the best word to use. So it had this backlog of like 4 or 5 games that it was able to very quickly port over to these new consoles and get them out in the West very quickly. I mean, I would say Shenmue. I would say that Yakuza 6, honestly, is maybe my least favorite Yakuza that I've played. Because it's almost like, this is the first one that was made for Generation 8 hardware, by the way. So this is the first one that was built from the ground up just for the PlayStation 4. And so it is definitely the best looking game in the series. But to me, it also feels a little rushed. The last Yakuza games, there was tons of stuff to do on the side. I never really got tired of it. This game, there's just not enough variety and enough stuff to do as you wander around the city. And since there's no gunplay, there's no vehicles in the game, and all there is fisticuffs, like, that wears out really quickly.
It sounds thrilling.
I had struggled to play this game. I've had it for a couple weeks, and I'm still only about 15 hours into it. And usually, I have a game for a couple weeks, like, I would have finished this game by now. But it's always like I get done with like my daily routine, and I'd sit down and be like, okay, what do I want to play? And this game, it was very hard for me to convince myself to say, I want to play Yakuza 6. I don't know. So again, I think people maybe who are fans of Shenmue, maybe the simpler open world games in that vein might really enjoy it. But for me, someone who's kind of moved on and really does love open world games and has embraced sort of all the innovations and the changes that have come to that genre over the last 10 years or more, actually. We're talking about like almost 20 years now since Shenmue came out. To me, it falls really flat.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to walk down the street and get into a fist fight, just go to Venice Beach. Someone will fuck with you down there. You'll get into a fight.
That's for sure. So, yeah, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, I played the demo on PSN they put out. It was like free for everybody or whatever. And I just got like a little taste, like the first hour and a half. And now I've kind of gone deeper into the game. And it really hasn't evolved much beyond what I played in the first couple hours in the demo. So I guess what I would say is, if you played the demo and you liked it a lot, this is more of the same. If you played the demo and you're kind of like, I wonder how maybe it will evolve, it really doesn't evolve at all. Pretty much what you got in that demo is what you're going to be doing for the bulk of the game. The story is pretty good. The writing, as I said, is excellent. If you're willing to sit through cutscenes that are really dull as far as like the presentation is concerned.
You're selling this game.
Oh
man, are you selling it?
I'm not really enjoying it, to be honest with you.
Sounds like a wait for it to be $15 or PS Plus or something like that.
Yeah, again, unless you're like an old school Shenmue fan. Because this really is like the spiritual successor to Shenmue.
Sure.
It's as if Shenmue was frozen in time but was released on the PlayStation 4, I guess is the best way
I think you're going to see that with Shenmue 3.
That's what I was leading into, is like, I'm really wondering if like Shenmue 3 is going to be just like this.
I think you know exactly what Shenmue 3 is going to be like.
do.
That's why when they announced that, I'm like, I don't care.
But the one thing, I didn't care that much either. I certainly wasn't like jumping up and down and falling on the floor like some people were. And I did like Shenmue when it came out, but the genre has left it so far in the dust. And everything I've seen of Shenmue 3 so far, it looks just like Yakuza. The one thing I would say Shenmue has that Yakuza didn't have is it does have a lot more variety. It does, I feel like, sink you into its world a little more. It's a little more immersive than Yakuza is. But I don't know. I'm 16 hours into it, and like we talked about at the beginning of the show, I got Sea of Thieves coming in. I got Ni no Kuni coming in.
Cast it aside.
I got Far Cry coming in. There's no way I'm going to keep playing this game and ignore those games that I just got.
Yeah, Far Cry, I mean, especially like, oh my God.
And that'll be
still
30-some hour commitment at least.
Oh, definitely.
So
definitely, can't wait.
So yeah, I think that's what I would say. If you played the free demo and you liked it, you'll probably like the game. If you're on the fence after playing the demo, I would just steer clear. So, all right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about more Japanese games. These are of a different sort, though.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say that.
So today, this game in particular.
Yeah.
So today, the UK banned Omega Labyrinth from being released there. Sam, roll the footage.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
So this is Omega Labyrinth. It is a JRPG.
Yeah.
I believe this was originally released for the Vita. Is that right?
It's coming here Vita, PS4, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe PC.
And it's... I don't know that it has a lot of redeeming factors to it, artistically.
I mean, I don't... So as far as I understand, they were specifically about the sexualization of underage girls, right? That was the big thing with them, right?
And that's what we want to really talk about.
And I think that that's a totally valid complaint, right? Like, you don't want to go down that road, and that's something that's way more accepted in Japanese culture and has been forever. But I will say this. This seems to be a weird line to draw, specifically because I can name 50 games like this that are on Vita right now. You know, like it doesn't, like Monster Monpiece and all these kinds of games that are totally ridiculous. So
Shenron Kagura game.
Yeah, like I just wonder.
But this game does. I mean, these girls do look really young.
I mean, I agree with you, but all I'm saying is, like, I have no problem with them saying, like, we don't want this on our platform, we don't want this in our territory. That's totally your prerogative. I'm not really a censorship guy, but this is sensitive stuff, right? All I'm saying is that this seems to be a capricious and arbitrary sort of line to draw, when there are a bunch of other games that came out that seem to kind of do the same and similar things. I tweeted out earlier today that I reviewed Monster Monpiece at IGN, which is a horrifically perverted game. Like a game where you literally rub these girls on the screen. No, you do that in
this game.
Yeah, so someone's always getting rubbed, right? Yeah. In one of these games. And it's all the Idea Factory and Omega Games and all those kinds of studios that are putting these games out and publishers that are putting these games out. So my whole take from it was, I was like, okay, like, but what about all these other games? And
are you sure that game came out in Europe?
Monster Monpiece?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I thought that this was the first game that they straight up banned in a while.
I think it is.
So like maybe like 7 or 8 years, I thought I read. Like straight up. Because here in the United States, this game's getting an M rating.
Yeah.
Are
you surprised it's going to be allowed to be released in the U.S.?
No. Because that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not surprised by that at all, because I would say 10% of Vita's catalog are these games. Like it's not even a joke. Like these games come out constantly. So it's just that people don't know about them. And so I think that this is like Idea Factory just wants to sell 25,000 copies of their game and they're going to go away, right? Like they don't need to promote these games. So yeah, I understand why people have take umbrage with it. Sure. And I would prefer that there be no censorship. And I think it's good that we're releasing all games here, as long as they're not, you can release X-rated games, but they're not going to go on the platform holders. But ESRB looked at the game and said that this is rated M. So I think we're a little less Puritan here, maybe. Like the game's also being banned in Australia and in other territories. You have to do what's most responsible for your societies. I'm not someone here to, people always attack America for Second Amendment stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I try not to put that out.
Right.
You do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm not judging you at all. But yeah, I just thought that this was, when I was looking at the footage and then thinking back into my memory bank of the shit that I've seen.
Yeah.
If
you've ever been to Japan, you've seen stuff far worse than this.
Yeah,
and it is a cultural difference. For whatever reason, Japan, even though very conservative in a lot of other ways where sex is involved, is okay sexualizing girls who at least appear to be very young.
Yeah,
we had kind of a similar controversy with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There were some girls in that game that were dressed in suggestive outfits.
Oh yeah, and they edited it, right?
Right, and they ended up changing it for the US version. And
Right.
I do agree with you. There's a lot of games that have slipped through the cracks. But I guess the question is, where do you draw the line? Like you said, you're happy it's coming out here. It doesn't appear to be censored in the US at all. You have no problem with this game being released in the US?
I guess not. I mean, like, I haven't played it, right? Like,
look,
I don't.
I'm very familiar with the game you're talking about,
Right.
but this game really is kind of egregious. I mean, these girls, they don't even try to make some of them look like they're of age.
Right. No, again, I don't think I've seen enough about it to have like a conclusive thing. I always err, just generally, with having little information, right? I generally err on the side of like, let's censor as little as possible. But
I agree.
But
1000%.
But so my thing is like, if the ESRB, which is I've known developers and publishers that have worked with the ESRB, they're hardcore. If you don't get something through and they have a problem, you have to pay the entire license, the entire fee again.
No, you're right.
Resubmit. It can delay your game.
Yeah.
The ESRB looked at this game and said like,
Are you surprised by that?
I am. I guess I'm not, specifically because they've in the past taken these kind of more niche games and said like, we're rating this an X if you don't change things. AO rather, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone's
here you can see some of the rubbing going on.
right, which is
I mean, these girls look pretty young.
yeah, they do. I mean, but the only point again that I'm making is that they don't look any younger or any like different than a lot of other games.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. So it's either that's why I'm afraid. It's why you don't introduce a new tax, because you can never get rid of it, right? Like you don't. I would rather just draw the line to what we all can universally, or at least close to universally agree, this is inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, moving the bar up and up and up, because then we might not like what ends up getting censored 5 or 10 years down the road.
No, you're right.
So I don't want to play this. I don't even want to see it. Can we just get it off the screen? Because I don't even want to look at it anymore. But
Look, I'll say this. Like,
I know people that like those kinds of games.
No, I mean,
that shit's keeping Vita alive.
There are people on
Sadly.
Sifted who like. I mean, look, we can see the data of what people watch, and it's like we put up stuff for like Senran Kagura. Like, I guarantee you that is one of the most watched pieces of media on that day. Guaranteed. It won't get a lot of one-ups. That's our version of likes on Sifted, and it won't get a lot of comments, but
you're watching it.
I see you guys. You guys are watching this stuff.
You fucking perverts. We know what you're up to.
Yeah. But look, Senran Kagura, at least most of the girls look like women.
Right.
That game to me, like, I also felt uncomfortable watching that footage. Like when you said get it off the screen, I was like, yeah, let's get that off the freaking
Yeah, it's like
screen.
it is a little. Because I don't like. I am of the mind, and this might make me sound Puritan, but that we've over-sexualized everything.
Yeah.
Like, why does... It reminds me of like a movie where you like have to watch a sex scene for 5 minutes. I'm like, that's fine. I like having sex. I like, it's fine, but this doesn't add to the story. Why do I have to watch this? And I feel like we're kind of sending weird signals to people and emphasizing it too much. And so maybe that's just a little piece of it. Obviously, no one's going to play this game. No one knows what this is, right? So we're giving it a lot.
Now.
Yeah, now you do. Now you can't get it out of your minds. I know who you guys
There's
are.
a bunch of people pre-ordering right now.
Idea Factory loves you guys. But yeah, no, it's or whoever the hell's publishing. I'm just guessing it's Idea Factory.
Because it probably is.
Yeah. But so to me, it's just. I don't know enough about it to know. When you see a game, or I've actually never even seen it. I've only read about it. But that game like Rape Play or whatever, those kinds of games that are really terrible. I think we can draw a line there.
Yeah.
I think you can draw a line where if the mechanic has anything to do with sexual assault, you could probably make sure that doesn't come out.
At least the girls in this game act like they're enjoying it.
I don't know. It's just the point. Like, so that's the line, right? We can have a line of there should be. I'm not saying there should be no line, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just surprised by the kind of the reaction to it, specifically because the ratings agency that's pretty stringent rendered its verdict, and
I have dealt with the ESRB extensively throughout my career, and they are a bunch of hard asses.
Yeah.
Like, they would come and scrape game trailers, and they'd send me a report and say, okay, well, we just spot-checked 300 games. You had the wrong rating on 78 of them. You didn't have descriptors for, like, 241 of them.
Age gates and all this?
Yeah, your age gate wasn't working on this one, and so you're not a part of the ESRB Security Council. So that little certificate that we sent you in an email is like null and like they tried to get us to like, okay, you're certified now. Now you can put our little logo up on the corner of your website. We don't care about your stupid logo.
And then you're
just leave me alone.
And then you're funding some poor son of a bitch playing Omega Labyrinth in his office, rubbing what appear to be underage girls' bodies.
Yeah, but you're absolutely, you're absolutely right though. Yeah. I mean, it is weird.
That's what you're doing.
The ESRB passed that game through based upon my experiences dealing with them, where they're a bunch of hardline, like, no, like, we draw a line in the sand and, like, you can't step over it. Like, it's shocking to me that this game is an AO.
Now, it's possible that the ESRB didn't get all the information, right? Like, when a game, so people, but when people don't know is that the publishers and the developers give everything to the ESRB. So they're like, the ESRB isn't necessarily playing the game. They're basically saying, like, show us a smorgasbord of some shit you think might be offensive.
Yeah.
So drug use, cigarette smoking, girls showing her cleavage, whatever the case might be. So maybe they just happen to leave out all of the
that would be a
bits and
huge
pieces.
Mistake because the ESRB, man, like, they may be asking for this code right now. Like, wait a minute, the UK banned this game over sexualizing underage girls? Mm-hmm. Like, yo, you need to send us some code.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if Idea Factory or whoever went on and produced those games, they may have to just trash them all and then change the code or go with the AO. If you get an AO, that's like, actually that may help sales.
Well, that on PC, but that's a death knell. You can't even be on the platforms with an AO rating. So so I always just, I defer to no censorship until you show me something where I'm like, this is, like, if you showed me that in a vacuum and I wasn't covering PlayStation for so long, I'd be much more mortified than I probably am.
Well, you're also a big Vita player, and you're very aware of all the games on the platform. And
some might say too aware.
No, but you're right. That is a big part of the Vita's library at this point. And you're starting to see those games kind of bleed over onto the consoles now. They'll port the Vita to PS4 or even Switch now, some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think they're going to pull the plug on Vita soon, like officially. They called it a legacy console 3 years ago, yet still put games on it. But with the PS Plus stuff, kind of, they announced that, they're going to start migrating all those games over next year. So
it's probably the last year, really, of Vita viability, right?
We've been saying that for a long time, but yeah, probably. I mean, the console came out in 2011 in Japan. It's been going. It should be very proud.
Well, it's doing very well in Japan.
Yeah, still trucking along.
Didn't do very well here.
Nope. All of you are responsible for that.
Yep.
Not me.
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about, I mentioned earlier, about how we're going to talk about another remake later on in the show, and this is it, the Final Fantasy VII remake. So this week, Square Enix decided it needed to hire more people for the project.
Yeah.
It said that the base of the game is pretty much finished, but they need to bring in these people to actually, I don't even know what that means.
First of all, I don't believe them. Second of all, I think it's a coin flip whether this even comes out. I'm really,
ever?
Yeah. I'm like really, I think CyberConnect was the studio working on it, which is a bad studio.
Yeah.
Or a mediocre studio by Japanese standards.
Well, CyberConnect is like the people you bring in to just do a quick and sloppy port, usually.
I just don't, even at Kind of Funny, like, I think this was announced, 2014 at PSX or 2015, one of those years. I kept saying to people, like, this isn't coming out. Because
even then you didn't think it was ever coming out.
No, because here's the thing about it, from my perspective, and I don't think it's necessarily not coming out. I think it's a coin flip, is because it's Final Fantasy VII, and you really are making a big mistake if you release something that isn't up to snuff. If you release something that's like a 6 on Metacritic, you're going to eat shit.
Yeah.
And especially because it's episodic, or that's what they're aiming for. So if the first one doesn't get it, whatever the Midgar scene or whatever they're going to do first, if it doesn't nail it, this game should have never been touched. And I don't understand why they're doing this to it. I'm not a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. I think it's a great game. I actually recently platinumed it this past summer. I went back and played the PS4 version for the first time since probably middle school or high school. And it's a great game. But why do we have to why is what's old always new again? I would rather them just put these resources, stop tantalizing people with this shit when we all know it's not going to be very good.
Really? You just assume it's not going to...
Come on, man.
Did you like Final Fantasy 15?
No.
Not at all?
No, I'm not going to say it's bad. It just wasn't for me. I played it for maybe 8 or 10 hours, and I was like, it's dudes driving around in a car, and that's cool, I guess. It's not what I'm looking for in Final Fantasy.
That was another example of a game that I played where I felt like when you look at its contemporaries in the genre, it didn't hold up. But I think a lot of fans of Final Fantasy had waited so long for the series to actually kind of come into the 21st century that they were like, well, wow, this actually kind of plays like The Witcher or like a typical modern action RPG. And I think that was good enough for a lot of them.
Well, after 13, anything would have been good enough, right? So it's like, I think that was part of the problem, was that not only with 11 and 14 kind of introducing MMO to the series, I think, especially with 14, kind of frustrated a lot of traditional players. It frustrated me simply because it felt like we had to wait longer, even though I'm sure that didn't take resources away from those, those various teams. But with 13 was so just dumb. Like, it was just so bad that I think, 15's a better game.
I haven't really resonated with Final Fantasy games since the PlayStation era.
Yeah, well, me neither. I think 10 was, I don't like 10. 12, I think, was a better game than 10. You could tell it was 2 games because they had, like, I think a producer and director, like, was even in the middle of it. But 6 and 4 are, like, untouchable games to me. Like, those games are brilliant, brilliant games, and Final Fantasy 15 doesn't hold a fucking candle in those games. And to me, I just look at this and I'm like, yeah, it looks beautiful, it's exciting, but do you really want this? Do you really want this? This is one of those things.
I do want to play. I do want to play it.
Well, you want to play it, but just generally, think about it as a general, like a notion of a Final Fantasy VII remake. Like, you have to be careful what you're asking for with this, because this is going to paint that game, and I think that might be a problem.
I wonder if this should be even called Final Fantasy VII Remake. Shouldn't it just be called Final Fantasy VII with a subtitle?
Yeah, which they kind of did with the other, the PSP game and Dirge of Cerberus on PS2, where they weren't obviously the games, but they told a different story, like Zack's story and Vincent's story. This looks cool to me, I guess, but if they're still hiring and scaling the studio at this point, this game is, I can't imagine this is any closer than like next gen at this point.
Well, you look at Final Fantasy 15. I mean,
I was convinced
it's changed from another game into Final Fantasy 15 and scrapped 7 years of work to basically start again.
I think that what people have to look at with this, and I don't know if you agree, Shane, is that there's a problem at Square Enix. There's a massive
Square Enix Japan.
Yeah, Japan. Like, there's a problem. There's clearly a problem of leadership. There's a problem of direction. No one,
I think there's a problem of conceit.
I don't get it. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're doing. I'm 50,000 times more excited for Dragon Quest XI than I am for anything Final Fantasy at this point. And I love Dragon Quest. I'm not saying that it's like a comparison where Dragon Quest is bad. I think Dragon Quest rules. But that's the thing that Enix always got before they combined it, was that they stayed true to that spirit. Dragon Quest games are recognizable from the first one, Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest in Japan, all the way to 11. Except for maybe 10, there's a through line between them. What makes Final Fantasy even Final Fantasy anymore, and who asked for this? This is the thing that, like,
I think a lot of people asked for this game.
What they asked for was a remake of Final Fantasy VII. This is not a remake of Final Fantasy VII, and I think there's a good. It
is a remake of Final Fantasy VII.
Maybe it's a literal
not.
remake.
I think people wanted a remaster of Final Fantasy VII, and instead we got a remake of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right.
People just wanted the old sprite art to be updated a little bit. Take away some of the contrivances that you had to have during the PlayStation era and just update it so it didn't feel quite as rickety and old.
Yeah, because it definitely feels old now.
But I don't think anybody wanted them to completely just scrap everything that Final Fantasy VII stood for this.
Well, don't you know Final Fantasy VII was an action RPG, and it was released episodically. That's why everyone loved it.
I do think that the fact that it's episodic gives me some hope that it actually is going to be released at some point.
Maybe one of them.
I mean, how hard is it to get one episode done?
Hard enough where they're still hiring for it, apparently.
Yeah. It's really mind-boggling.
And you brought up
Should Square Enix have a bigger project in at least Japan? Is there a bigger project it's working on right now?
I would assume 16's in pre-production. Like, I don't know. You brought it up earlier with when we were talking about the Battle Royale games, where you scale up, you hire, you scale, and then people have to introduce themselves to the concept, and to the hardware, and to the
process.
And like
I
don't get what Square is doing, and I think that there's a leadership problem there. And I think the only reason that there wasn't a major shakeup in corporate in Square Enix in Japan was because Final Fantasy 15 sold well.
I think it's because of Square Enix North America. Because you were saying earlier, like, you don't know what's going on at Square Enix, but I think Square Enix North America is doing great.
Well, with IDOS and Crystal and all those? Yeah, much better, sure. And they kind of ceased operations with IO and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. They're doing much better stuff in North America than they are.
I mean, they're pulling the cart at this point.
I would assume
Final Fantasy 15 did pretty well.
Yeah, it did well. It was the best-selling Final Fantasy game ever. So, I mean, I'm sure that they were happy about that, but I would be curious about how much money they sunk into Versus, and then kind of they must have. I mean, it was a lot of
money. I think they did say that they needed to sell like 7 or 8 million copies to break even across like Versus and 15 proper. And it appears that it did that, but you can't look at a 10+ year development cycle as a success, no matter how much money you make.
I agree.
You can't.
And then multiple delays even when they were ready to go.
Right.
I was really surprised that game came out. Like I was just like, this game must be so fucked. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, year after year after year of waiting for Versus to show us something new, and then they put out a big CG trailer. You're like, wow, okay, it's coming, and then it's not. The messaging from Square Enix Japan's terrible. You never know what's going on. I mean, they've actually been pretty forthright with what's been going on with this remake. Maybe too much.
Yeah, they showed
maybe to the detriment of the project.
They showed it too soon. Like, way too soon. Even now would be too soon.
But I think this harkens back to what you were saying earlier about how there's so many shows, so many press conferences, and you always need something. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes you're a partner. Sony comes to you, PlayStation comes to you, you're like, we've been bros for how many years now? How much money have we made you guys? Well, we need something. We need something to get people hooked on PlayStation 4 to buy it now and hold it until you release it. They're like, well, we've been kicking around this Final Fantasy VII remake, you know?
Right. And how many people bought PS3s for Final Fantasy 15 or Final Fantasy Versus 13?
Exactly.
I think they made the same mistake. I would be surprised if these. I don't know. I think people are going to be not happy when these come out.
but now you think they will come out?
I think it's a coin flip if they do. But if they do, how can anyone think these games are in good shape? Is beyond me.
Well, after playing Final Fantasy 15, I mean, it sold well, but how much time did you spend with it?
8 or 10 hours. I really wasn't.
I finished it.
I wasn't that impressed with it. I was just like, it's cool. Like I don't think it was a bad game by any stretch of the imagination from what I saw. But it was not. The time didn't justify the like what I was seeing, and also I just felt like it was when we have open world game RPGs that are way better.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we see a lot from Japan. It's like they have huge fan bases, people that are obsessed over their games, and then when they release something, I mean, we talked about Breath of the Wild a little bit on your podcast in this way. Even if they can get close to what the standard is, a lot of fans are more than willing to forgive a little bit of the shortcomings just because, hey, this is my favorite franchise from my favorite Japanese developer, and it feels almost as good as this game that was made in the West. And that, for a lot of fans, I think that's good enough for them.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of us just inherently, especially older gamers, like we root for them. Like I want Square to do well. I want Nintendo to do well. But I kind of try to look through things as with what I look at as, everything's inherently subjective, but I try to look at things and be honest with myself and then translate that to the audience, and they don't always like what they hear. But when I played Zelda, I was like, this is really cool. This is great. There are better games than this that do this. Yeah. And when I saw Final Fantasy 15, I was like, this is great. There are better games that do this. And I think it is the attachment to Zelda, the attachment to Final Fantasy, the Japanese lineage of these games, how much we love those games and we want them to do well. That we kind of, I think Zelda got a huge score bump because of that. I said that on my show, and I stand by that.
Yeah, I think Final Fantasy 15 was reviewed pretty evenly. It didn't set the world on fire on Metacritic. And I think it ended up ultimately probably getting the scores that it deserved because it didn't review like 9+ or anything like that. It was a good game. It wasn't a great game. And I think for some Final Fantasy fans, that's good enough because...
Well, we haven't gotten 13. I mean, like I said, 13 was bad. And so, yeah, a step in the right direction, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think that's enough for some people to see that auspicious horizon, I guess, maybe is a good way to put it. They're like, okay, maybe this is a step towards something better.
Sure.
I mean, I would say that Final Fantasy 15 does give me a little bit of hope that the Final Fantasy VII remake will at least be passable.
Well, you'll find out in 2022.
Yeah, it might be true. It might be a PlayStation 5 launch game at the rate things are going perhaps. And it would make for one hell of a launch game.
Yeah, my theory is that Horizon 2 is going to be a launch game. And I definitely think Death Stranding is a launch game for PS5. Like, I feel that.
Well, that's definitely going to be, it's going to straddle the line. Yeah. I think they'll still release it for PS4, but it'll also be, just like The Last of Us 2, I think it'll be dual threat, so to speak.
We will see.
Yep, we
All
will.
Conjecture right now.
That's right. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about crossovers. And not the cross-platform play that we talked about earlier. We're talking about gaming crossovers.
Sure.
This week it was announced that Geralt from The Witcher is going to be in Soul Calibur 6.
Pretty cool.
I think it's really cool, actually. Yeah. The trailer for it makes it works. He fits right in with the aesthetic of Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur has been a franchise that has done this probably more than any other, unless you're talking about like a franchise that's made for that, like Marvel versus Capcom. But as a standalone franchise, to have other characters come into it, Soul Calibur has been one of the leaders, in my opinion.
Yep.
I think Geralt fits in perfectly with Soul Calibur. Obviously, the sword is his weapon of choice. Soul Calibur is a weapons-based fighter, always has been, probably always will be. So I think it works well. But it brought up the topic of gaming crossovers, and they don't always work out as well as it has in Soul Calibur. In fact, we've both chosen crossovers, a crossover that we like and a crossover that we didn't like. And one crossover that you don't like actually comes from Soul Calibur,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, Spawn, which was the PS. So for people that don't know, on PlayStation or in the PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox era, there were or was Spawn? Yeah, Spawn was the PS2 and Xbox was who was on Xbox in Soul Cal 2? I can't even remember at this point. But anyway, each of the consoles had their own guy, and obviously GameCube was the favorite because Link was in it.
Yeah.
So I looked at. I remember back in. I had all three consoles, and I was like, which one did I want to buy? And I was like, obviously the GameCube one. I always kind of deferred to GameCube actually. And I was kind of like, I felt like the other two, it was like Heihachi and Spawn, and the other two, I was like, this is so weak. This is because it's only because Link was standing next to them and the other one, and you couldn't play him as that. So I loved that crossover. And when I think of fighting crossovers, that's the game I always think about. I loved Soul Calibur 2. It was such a great game.
It was one of my favorite fighting games ever.
Yeah, me too. Like I put a lot of time. I love the original Soul Cal on Dreamcast as well, but and Power Stone and yeah, but
Soul's Edge in the arcade.
Sure. And I'm not a huge 3D fighter fan. Like, so it has like Power Stone and those other games did something special to kind of attract me because I was typically more into like, especially Capcom fighters, the 2D fighters. But I liked that crossover with Link, and then when I looked at Spawn, I was like, this is a little.
So what was it about Spawn that didn't do it for you?
It just didn't really fit. Like I just didn't understand. Here he is. I didn't understand how this character fit this aesthetic at all. Like Link to me, because we weren't getting like cell shaded necessarily Wind Waker Link, so it worked. Like it just seemed like
he fit in fine.
Yeah, I just felt like I remember playing this at a buddy's house who had it, this version of it, and I was like, this just doesn't seem to work for me. And so
I honestly don't know much about Spawn. I'm not a huge comic guy.
Yeah,
Does he actually even use a big battle axe?
I don't know. I thought he.
Maybe somebody in chat knows.
I'm trying to think back to the memories of the '90s movie. Doesn't he materialize his weapons out of like his suit or something like that?
Does he? Does he morph the weapons out of his?
Maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. I thought so.
I bet somebody in chat will let us know.
But yeah, no, I think it was just a comparison thing because Link was available in the GameCube version, and the GameCube version was so superior, especially with the GameCube controller, which I love.
Yeah, I was just talking about it last week how much I love the GameCube controller.
My favorite controller of all time.
That's interesting.
It's so ergonomic.
That's what I was talking about. That's exactly what I said last week. The GameCube controller is one of my favorites. The button layout isn't great, but it felt so good in your hands.
Oh, it felt perfect. I mean, maybe we have the size of our hands is best. But when people disparage the GameCube controller, I have a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
What is the one that you didn't like?
Let's see. This is gonna really piss people off. Because to most people, I think this is like one of the most successful gaming crossovers of all time, but I absolutely despise it, and that is Kingdom Hearts.
I don't like Kingdom Hearts either. So
it's not even that I don't like the game. It's just that it makes no sense whatsoever.
No, not at all.
And I feel like Square Enix and Square back in the day has done a pretty good job of trying to rationalize how all these characters are in the same place at the same time, but it just ends up, and maybe it's because I'm older and I grew up with Disney, and Disney was its own thing. And you understood that universe and how if any characters link together, how they link together, and it all kind of made sense. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. This feels like the product of someone from Square and someone from Disney having a business dinner in Japan and then going out to like a hostess bar afterwards and getting hammered on sake and saying, hey, what about this? Well, we just bring these Disney characters into your Final Fantasy stuff and we'll get rich. And they were right. But that doesn't mean it was a good idea.
No, I Never understood Kingdom Hearts. And it's funny, it's another example. Kingdom Hearts 3 is another example of a game that who the hell knows when that's coming out.
It looks like maybe this year now.
Yeah, I don't think so. But we'll see. Again, we'll see. Whenever someone says a Square Enix game from Japan's coming out this year, I always say no, it's not.
Yeah.
Until I'm proven wrong. But I was always confused by it too. It seemed incoherent to me from the very beginning. So I was never attracted to it. But it has great critical acclaim. The thing that bothers me about Kingdom Hearts, though, is just these random titles, these random re-releases, 2.8, hyper remix, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Our normal co-host, Matt Kyle, he's a big Kingdom Hearts guy, and he knows what all that stuff means. Like, he knows every...
It's Latin.
It's insane. Like, I can't keep track of it at all. But fans have managed to.
Yeah, if you're happy and excited about it, I think it's cool. I mean, the one cool thing is that it seemed like this relationship between Square and Disney is the reason that they were able to segue into the Marvel stuff.
No, you're right. I mean, it actually ended up ultimately paying dividends like decades on down the road.
Because they were just basically like, we already did all this. We are capable of doing this.
Yeah, I mean, look, Disney put a lot of trust in Square, and now Square Enix, to handle... I mean, look, Disney, there's no one more protective of IP than Disney. Particularly Mickey Mouse and that whole universe of characters.
Which is amazing, yeah.
And it should be, because those characters are probably worth more than any other set of characters in the world. And once you entrust a company to create interactive entertainment based around those characters, and you feel like they do okay, I think you've created a pretty good relationship there where you feel like you can trust them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that trust ultimately bubbled over into a lot of the deals that Square has made with Disney long after the fact of Kingdom Hearts. And look, I don't begrudge anybody who loves Kingdom Hearts. I'm not saying you're wrong for liking it. I'm just saying, for me personally, someone who grew up with Disney characters and also grew up with Final Fantasy, it makes no sense whatsoever for me for those characters to be in the same video game together.
I agree. I am saying you're wrong for liking it, and I think you should go play Omega Labyrinth.
All right, now that we've talked about crossovers that we don't like, talk about a crossover that you do like.
So this is a funny one for me. When you emailed me about this, I knew immediately I was going to say Spawn, but the other one I was like, what's a good one? And I ended up picking up Kratos in Shovel Knight.
That is a good one.
So the reason I say that is, again, I like to be transparent about this stuff. I'm very close with the Yacht Club guys. I wrote the foreword to their art book that just came out. And so we had a nice correspondence. I was also the guy that revealed the game to the world. They chose me to do that.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a huge NES nerd.
Yeah.
And Mega Man nerd and Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden, all the games that this takes from. So I just want to be clear about that. Again, you can take what I say with a grain of salt. They emailed me when I was still at IGN. They're like, we're doing a PlayStation crossover. What is the character that you think should be in it? And I said Nathan Drake. Which makes no fucking sense. I think I thought about it for about 3 seconds. So later they're like, we're going to do Kratos. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And the Battletoads obviously are in the Xbox one. And he fits perfectly in the Shovel Knight world. Like, the Battletoads was fun.
Yeah.
Like, it was a fun little ode. I liked that. But this, I was like, this works. Like, it's almost as if Kratos belongs here. And so I liked that crossover a lot. And I thought it was a nice little ode to PlayStation fans to get that. And obviously, nice little cross promotion too because we didn't know at this time when they were doing this, I don't think, about the new God of War game yet. So this was like a little. It's one of those things where it's like stealth, like stealth announcing something or like kind of hinting at something a little bit, which is cool.
Well, I thought the integration was pretty cool too. Like once you beat him, you get a new weapon and new armor, I believe, if I remember correctly. I think the other thing that's cool about it is seeing Kratos in a completely different perspective. I mean, it's a 2D game.
Yep.
Would you have ever dreamed you would see Kratos in 2D?
It's awesome.
And pixel art?
He looks great, too. I mean,
yeah, they did a great job on him. I wonder if they did that?
I'm sure they did. Yeah,
or if Sony Santa Monica created it.
No, I think that they did it. To create... I'm not saying that they're not capable of it, but we're really one of the lost art forms in gaming right now, which is the reason why a lot of games are going 2.5D, particularly in Japan, whether you're talking about Mega Man 11 or Bloodstained, is because there just aren't enough talented pixel artists anymore to be able to do this stuff. It's super expensive. They definitely did that. I would be shocked if Woz didn't do that himself over at Yacht Club.
I'm sure there were lots of checks and balances along the way.
Definitely. But they're in Marina Del Rey, so they're right in the same... Like they're like 10 minutes away from Sony Santa Monica, so I'm sure there was a lot of nice crossover there. But yeah, like, I can't wait to see what they do next. I saw them last in December. I had them sign the art book that I wrote the forward for my nephew, who's a huge fan of the game.
Cool.
And I just keep encouraging him. I'm like, let's just get this King Knight shit over with so we can move on to the next game. You know,
Would you be happy if it was another Shovel Knight?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I know that they originally said that they wanted to do 16-bit, 64-bit, like kind of,
bring Shovel Knight up through the generations.
Don't fuck with a good thing. Shovel Knight is immaculate. It's immaculate. It's so good. And if they don't do this again, like, I'm going to be a little disappointed. I don't.
Well, it sounds like you have a direct line to them, so you can guide them along the way.
I don't give a fuck what I say, but I don't. Even like the Mega Man X jump is really cool with Capcom, but I don't even need that. I think that 8-bit aesthetic is just perfect. Like, they should annualize that, like, for a little while. Like, do it. People love those kinds of things. Remember, we got 6 Mega Man games that are better than 99% of the NES catalog in 6 years. Yeah. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing. Typically it is, but not always. Yep. So yeah, that's my choice. How about you?
All right, my pick for best crossover, and this is interesting because I don't really care for Kingdom Hearts, and I said I hated that crossover. I don't really care for this franchise either, but I love how the crossovers work in it, and that's Super Smash Brothers.
Sure.
And look, there's literally like a dozen fighting games that cross over characters from other franchises. Like, obviously, Marvel vs. Capcom is the most popular. We talked about Soul Calibur bringing characters in. But what's special about the way Smash Brothers does it is that it's from everywhere. They bring in characters. They bring in Solid Snake.
Yeah, which is really cool.
They bring in Sonic. They bring in Pac-Man. They bring in Mega Man. You never know what kind of characters that they're going to bring in. So I like the choices that they make for the characters that they bring in. Only Nintendo could get the industry's biggest icons in its fighting game. So I like how it gets the characters in. I like the characters it actually chooses for it. But most importantly, once they have the characters in, I love how they treat those characters. Each character is handled so well. It has its own stage. It has its own music. The way the characters fight, it stays true to what the studio that created that character originally envisioned that character to be. The character of the characters is dead on. You can just tell that Nintendo does everything with kids' gloves when it handles like these IPs and these characters. And I've never felt like a character from outside the game didn't make sense inside the game or disrespected that character from where its origins come from.
Right, I agree.
And again, I'm not a fan of Smash Brothers. I played the first one a ton. I played the next one less. Played the next one less. Hardly even played the Wii U version of the game. I'm not a big fan of it as far as it being just a video game, but just the way that it handles crossovers and the way it brings all these characters from all these different, even just internally. If you think about just using Nintendo's characters and the crazy disparate universes that these characters come from, yet Nintendo can bring them all into one game and have it all make sense, I think it's brilliant. I think Nintendo does that better than any other developer on the planet. So, again, not a huge fan of Smash Brothers, but I love the way that they handle the IP and the characters from the outside and from the inside.
Completely agree. Yeah. Solid Snake especially was really cool.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Well, it had I mean, they get it, right? They figure out what it makes each character special, and they focus on it. Like, they had the sneaking box for Solid Snake. Like, how does that work in a fighting game? Nintendo figured out how to do it. With Mega Man, it's all about his blaster, which is what the focus of Mega Man. So Nintendo's just really smart about it, and I think a lot of that comes, too, with a lot of people who work at Nintendo of Japan growing up with games just like we did. They're 50, 60-year-old people at this point. They know what made each one of those characters so special throughout the years, and I think that they apply that to their craft when they get them into Smash Brothers. So
absolutely. Agreed 100%.
They do a great job. So it's time for our trailer of the week. And you don't know this, but some of the Sifted viewers may know it. Some of the people who came for you may not know it, but this is actually everyone's opportunity to get questions into the chat. Go at Sifted Games, because it's hard to plug out the questions from people who are just making comments. So if you go at Sifted Games and then ask a question, it's easier for us to find them in the chat. Our trailer of the week this week is for Sea of Thieves. I know you're not going to play it because you sold your Xbox.
Yeah, gave it away. Gave it to my my brother-in-law.
I'm going to play it. I have a code sitting in my inbox right now. I cannot wait to play it this weekend. We didn't get to talk about it on the show today. This is not actually a game where I did not get code early. It's different. When you're one of the smaller guys, it's like some publishers you get with everybody else. Sometimes you get them a little later. This was one of those cases. I did play the crap out of the beta, so I have a pretty good idea of what it's all about.
I've heard universally good things about it. So.
I enjoyed the beta a good bit. It wore a little thin, but I think that might just be a factor of it being a beta and just being limited in its scope. Because I did play it for like 20, 30 hours, and all the missions were the same, and I still played it for that long. So I think that's a pretty good sign. But because we couldn't talk about it on today's show, we will next week. But since we couldn't talk about it today, we decided to make it our trailer of the week. And here it is, the launch trailer for Sea of Thieves. Rare has released the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
I was just telling Colin he didn't play the beta, but during the beta, you could hear the Kraken roaring the whole time you played it. You just hear this roar, like the whole time. And with this trailer, they finally actually showed the Kraken and what it does. It looks like it's going to definitely add an element to the game where maybe you have to work together as a fleet of ships attacking maybe the Kraken. Because a lot of Sea of Thieves in the beta was just like, hey, there's that boat, let's go destroy it and then take all their shit. Like, that's pretty much what the beta was. And so it'll be interesting maybe to have some elements where you actually work together with other people on the sea. So that's the hope anyway. All right, let's get to some questions.
Okay.
We're going to shade these towards Colin. So if you guys are asking Colin questions, I'm going to try to get them in because I'm here every week and Colin's not. So here's one for you, Colin, from WolfOx10JC. PlayStation 5 prediction date.
I think November 2019 is either. So I've been telling people this. I think no earlier than November 2019 and no later than November 2020. So I think in that window. But I think based on the fact that I know people have been working on games for this thing for a while, I just cannot imagine that it won't be next year. But
it makes too much sense.
But I don't know. You know, I just don't know for sure. It just seems weird to me that they would need so much lead time, you know. So I think that might be what they're aiming for. But PS4 is doing so well that Sony might not even really know yet. They might want to hold it for a year.
But Sony's pretty good about keeping its old console around and relevant, even though there's a new one. Mm-hmm. And like we talked about earlier with backwards compatibility, really is just scaling at this point. It's not like you're abandoning PlayStation 4 when you launch PlayStation 5. I mean, with these mid-cycle upgrades we saw with Xbox One X and S to an extent, and PlayStation 4 Pro, I think it's just going to kind of keep going in those steps. And I think any game you buy on PS4 is going to work on PlayStation 5 and probably PlayStation 6 and probably PlayStation 7. And by then we have like a holodeck or some crap. So
Right. I think that you're right. Like God of War 2, for instance, came out on PS2 in 2007. So that was a year after.
Yeah.
Actually, it was in the spring. So it was like 6 months after PS3 came out. But I will say that with the transfer to PS3 to PS4, there was a lot less of that. There was some of the third-party stuff, specifically from Bandai Namco and a few other Japanese publishers that were releasing games, like even Tales games and stuff, pretty late. So there might be a little fear there because I don't know that Sony's first-party leverage is not as much as it used to be. They've and like I said, I'm not sure that a couple of these studios are going to survive the PS4 era. So they might be a little wary of that. But so I think 2019 is, I don't want to say a safe bet, but a bet that's reasonable. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's find another one. From Goose7, Colin, what games will you play with Dagan on this retro-inspired Let's Play series?
That I'll keep a little close to my vest. We already have a few picked out. My brother's a retro game collector, so and I have a ton of old NES, SNES stuff. So we're going to try to pick out from different platforms, both games that we're familiar with that I think will be fun, and then games that we never played, or like we weren't really Sega kids, so at all. Specifically with the Master System, our neighbor had one.
It's interesting you working with your brother on something like this.
I'm excited about it. I mean, I have to be honest. I've been telling people, I'm like, it's a little selfish of me to do Knockback because it really is the excuse I've long been looking for to do something with Dagan, who's my brother. And he's such a fucking nerd, you know, like, and so it's good.
Who's the bigger nerd? If you guys had a nerd off, who would win?
He's definitely the bigger nerd.
Yeah.
But that's a badge of honor in our family.
Of course.
We're all huge nerds.
Yeah.
So like I'm excited to do something with him, and I think he's so natural. The feedback we've gotten from Knockback is doing like half the traffic that Fireside Chats does.
Yeah,
but
it'll pick up though.
It will. It's getting bigger, but I've noticed that like the kind words that people have to say about it are many times what we get about Fireside Chats, because people are just listening to Fireside Chats or whatever, but they're not engaging with it as much. So
yeah.
I'm super stoked about it, and I'm stoked about the one thing is my brother, even though he has a big role at Sesame Workshop, has been pretty private in his life. And has only recently got on social media, and like my whole thing is like I just want to protect him. From all that's bad. They come for me every once in a while. I don't want them to come. So that's a little weird working with my brother, because there's a little bit of like.
Well, if he hasn't been kind of out there as well, there may be a little bit of a shell that you need to crack to kind of get him to come out a little bit and be himself, right?
The funny thing about it is he's been. If people listen to the show, I hope you guys do. CLS Knockback is he's so natural. Like, it's awesome. I've been doing this for a long time. Like, I can sit down in a chair. We can do this for fucking 5 hours. It's easy. But for a lot of people, even in the audience, you wouldn't be able to do it because you're not used to it. You'd freeze, or you'd be nervous, or you'd think about it too much.
Well, we just started doing a call-in show called Today's High Score on Sifted, where literally we just use Skype and our users call in, and it's like sports talk for games. In fact, it'll be streaming right here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific for those of you who came to see Colin. If you guys want to check it out. But I've been pleasantly surprised by how well our users have done.
That's awesome.
People are shy. Like, there's a lot of people who are watching but won't call in. But I think once people kind of get over the hump and do it, they find out that it's just like talking with your bros about games.
Yeah, it's really easy what I always say is just don't think about it. Like people think about it too much. I often say I just play myself on camera. So I'm super excited because I think, but it's probably the same reason why a lot of your audience is good at it naturally too, is because everyone's just listening to this shit all day.
Yeah.
They're listening to podcasts. They're even listening to talk radio or sports radio. So they become acclimated and they're able to do it.
I think they figure out what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they just got to go out and do it.
Exactly.
All right, let's find another one. Golden Boy 5, even though you got rid of your Xbox, what were your impressions of Cuphead?
I haven't played it yet.
You haven't played Cuphead? I think we talked about this.
Which is amazing. I'll get it on Steam at some point. I mean, there's just... Actually, this first quarter probably would have been a good time to play.
It would have, yeah.
But
you're going to need some time, too.
I live for hard 2D platformers. I love them. That's like if someone was like, what is the platform, like what is the genre that you would want to play for the rest of your life? You only play one.
What's your desert island genre?
Yeah, definitely. Like Mega Man 3 is my favorite game of all time. So like anything that feels or looks or tastes or smells like that is good to me. So it looks awesome. My brother loves it. I think that I have to get to it at some point. That was the one thing where I got rid of the Xbox and I was like, fuck me. Because there was this game like Gears.
Any interest in getting the Xbox One X at all?
No.
Not even to play third-party stuff on the best platform possible? Nope.
It's like I like I like just having an ecosystem. Like I said a million times now, like I don't want to be redundant to your audience. I love trophies. I'm a PlayStation guy. I've always been unabashed about that.
Well, at least you're honest.
Yeah, no, I always listen.
Because a lot of people will be that way, and they'll try to play it off like, oh no, I like everything the same.
I know lots of people that write and podcasts about games or whatever that act more agnostic than they are, no matter which way they go. I don't think I've often said, like, it doesn't, just because I prefer PlayStation doesn't mean I can't look at something objectively on another platform. And also, the most unfulfilling generation I ever had was PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, because that was the first time I had money.
Yeah.
And I could afford everything. And I felt like I look back at some of the catalog of these things, and I'm like, I don't even know what half these games on PS2 are, because I was so up GameCube's ass for a little while, and then I was up Xbox's ass, and I just like being up PlayStation's ass. I can only be up so many asses at one time.
I hear you.
You know what I mean?
Here's one from Mega2448. Colin, will PlayStation's success with the PS4 bolster the success of the PS5, or will it be a clean slate?
I think it depends on how it's revealed. I think that Xbox One would have done much better if they didn't fuck it up so bad when they revealed it.
But it's easy to swap. I mean, we saw Xbox 360 pretty much dominate. PlayStation 3 came on a little at the end because Sony supported PlayStation 3 a little bit longer. But just like that, Switch was flipped, PlayStation 4 dominates over Xbox One.
Yeah, but to me, that's a very simple telling of what happened, though, right? Like, PS3 outsold Xbox 360 ultimately with a year less time on the market, because starting in 2009 with the Slim, it did start to come on.
Yeah.
And the games were better on PS3. Like, I firmly believe that.
First party.
Yeah. I'm not saying games were running better on PS3. Yeah. That's definitely not true. But the first party
output, it's superior.
The first party output is even more superior now.
Oh, for sure. It's not even in the same like stratosphere.
But to me, I think that, like I said, I don't think it was Xbox One itself that was the problem. It was Don Matrick, it was that bravado, it was Call of Duty Sports TV Connect. Call of Duty Sports TV Connect.
Right.
They had no idea what the fuck people liked about Xbox 360, so they were not able to translate that, so they immediately dropped the ball, and they went second. So that was a huge problem because PS4 was so artfully revealed in Manhattan a few months before that. Then the price point was wrong.
Yeah.
The games weren't there.
The message was the big problem, though.
So it's not that...
Most people thought they weren't going to be able to, like, trade their games in. And
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't just a Switch, from my perspective. It was like this deluge of nonsense. Microsoft should have won. There was no reason why it should have went like the way it went. So I think Sony hopefully.
But have you noticed, though, a lot of the principles that Microsoft unveiled initially for Xbox One are kind of starting to come to pass now, and people are kind of okay with it?
Yeah, it's certainly. Well, more in the digital platform stuff is certainly something that they identified early, and they did that with Xbox Live. I mean, they were the pioneers of that. Yeah. Putting an Ethernet port on your console released in 2001 is a really bold thing to do. Yeah. And so I just think that Sony needs to remain smart and remain focused on games. All the other stuff is secondary and tertiary. It does not matter. Everything plays Netflix now. Everything can play an NFL Sunday Ticket. Everything plays Spotify. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's about the games.
Yeah. That's what Microsoft lost sight of. Yeah.
The one problem I think that they're going to run into, I think both platform holders are going to run into, is that, and I think I might have talked about this on one of my videos, I don't know, is the consoles for the first time are so good. And I don't mean that by the games. I don't mean by the way the games look. They're just... My girlfriend, who doesn't really play games that much, picks up the controller, can navigate perfectly, get into whatever she wants.
Very intuitive.
Some people are just going to look at this and be like, I don't really need a new one. Not because I don't want to play these new games, but 90% of this is me doing X, Y, and Z, and it does it perfectly. Yeah. It's not like the PS3 to PS4.
There's a lot of people that still have like a Wii because they can use like Netflix on it.
I know, like 480i or whatever the hell.
Or you go to someone's cabin and like they have an old dusty Wii set in the corner. Okay, to play Netflix. Like I'll never throw that thing away. Like
you're right. To me, it's just one of those situations where they might have done too well. That's the one reason why I think that they might hold until 2020, because PS4 is still churning. It's still selling. It's going to reach 100 million units, which is amazing.
I mean, we're also at the law of diminishing returns with hardware, where you have to spend double the money to get a third increase in performance. And I think for a lot of casual players, it's really hard. I think it was really hard for a lot of casual players to see the difference between the 360 and the PS3 and the PS4 and the Xbox One, particularly with the Xbox One. And now it's getting even slimmer, because now what's the difference? It's 1080p to 4K, and your TV needs to be 60 inches or bigger, or you can't even see the difference. And I think the adoption of 4K TVs has been slow. Everyone has a great 1080p TV at this point.
I haven't bought a TV
like I said, that has Netflix and Amazon Prime and everything on it. And they're like, do I need a 4K TV? Granted, when that 1080p TV dies, which I have a plasma that's now like 12 years old, still looks great, working fine. But granted, when those TVs die, of course they're going to go to 4K because you can't buy a 1080p TV now.
Right.
But these TVs are going to be around for a while, and I think maybe these consoles jumped the gun a little bit on 4K, especially PS4 Pro, where it can't even do it natively yet.
No, and you have to also select how you really want to, not only with 4K, but just how you want to use its extra power. Like you can't run at a frame rate that you want, and also resolution. You're right in that sense, but I think this kind of illustrates the point. Because it's not about the look necessarily, but about the feel. You could feel the difference between PS3 and PS4. PS3, if anyone's ever gone back recently and used the PS3, it fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's really funky.
It's like the cross-media bar is awful. Yeah. The PS4 is so fluid and beautiful and nice. Is, That's the thing that I think might hold people back, because like you're saying, casual gamers aren't graphic whores. They didn't even really want to make the jump initially, but they did. Yeah. And they have something that feels right. And so I think that that's going to be a problem. It's going to be... it's a similar thing that they're dealing with PlayStation VR, where I fear for them where PS5 is something you're going to have to play to understand the difference. Otherwise, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not... I shit you not. Like, you could put something on 1080p or 720p, and I don't even know if I can tell you the difference.
It's hard. Depends on how big the TV is.
I'm just not one of those people. Like, even frame rates, like where people at IGN that were like savant about it would like walk by and be like, "Oh, this game's running at like 29 frames a second." I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, like it's either running bad, it's running fine, it's running good. I can't tell the difference. That's just not the kind of gamer I am. And if I existed in the industry like that, there are many of me.
Oh yeah.
So I think they're going to be dealing with that. But we'll see. We'll see how it all goes.
All right, we'll take a couple more, guys.
Okay.
I know there's a megaton of questions in here. Let's see. Captain Hogwash. Will Colin ever do anything on Twitch again?
Probably not.
I love that screen name, by the way, Captain Hogwash.
It is. It's great. At my old company, Kind of Funny, I was the one that wanted us to go hard into Twitch, actually, and I was the one that came up with which they still do, the morning show and all that stuff. That was my idea. We originally called it Colin and Greg Live for 2 years. And we enjoyed that. I was like, it's a way for us to interface. I'm a huge sports fan like you, and I'm a huge political guy, so I often absorb Morning Joe and Mike and the Mad Dog or what I was listening to at the time.
Yeah.
PTI and stuff like that, and I wanted to kind of give that to games. And what I was shocked by was that no one copied that idea still. It's a great idea, but it's not an idea that I'm capable of really doing or want to do. I don't like the live stuff, personally. I know we're doing this live, but when I'm,
thanks, Colin.
For my workflow,
I'm glad you showed up at least.
For my workflow, I can't do it. We talked about this actually on my show.
Yeah.
When you did my show some months ago, is that for me, I like to produce something and then put it out into the world and see what happens, as opposed to doing it in real time. And I think Twitch is like, it's weird to say this because I'm a YouTuber, I guess, and a podcaster, but Twitch is so competitive that it seems like a weird thing for me to jump into when my space of comfort is more in line with what I typically do, which is podcasts and kind of VOD stuff. So
it all depends on the type of content that you want to create.
Exactly, and I love,
like I don't hardly ever just stream games on our Twitch channel. Like very rarely. Like we'll do marathons sometimes. We'll do like a 25. Like I tried to do a 24-hour Patreon drive stream, which literally almost killed me.
Yeah, that's tough. We did a few of
That's fun when you're maybe 21 to 24 years old. You get to my age, man. You get to around hour 21, your body's like, bro, I'm going to kill you. I'm literally going to kill you. Like, I literally felt the last few hours that I might die on the stream.
I did several of those 24-hour streams at Kind of Funny, and they're awful. Like, I'm glad the users like it.
Yeah.
I sure didn't.
It did help our Patreon. I'll say that much. Like, people watching you struggle, they were like, oh, I'll give you $1. Like, it was kind of fun to watch our Patreon go up and up and up. And then once we didn't hit our goal, it was very demoralizing. Because you're like, oh, God, we were so close. And then we didn't get to it. And then, But I rarely just play games. There's no reason for me to just go and play games on Twitch. There's not. So I try to use the medium in a way that I can leverage it toward the type of content that I want to create. So being able to do this Q&A at the end of the show,
yeah, it's brilliant.
We can only do this.
Yeah,
and I feel like some of these questions have been better than the conversation that we've had on the show. And so I think
I'm sorry.
No, that's my fault. I created the rundown. And like the show that we're doing tomorrow at 1, like the call-in show where people call in on Skype and we just hang out and talk games together. You can't do that without Twitch and without the live element of it. So I try to look at every technology that we have available to us and try to find a way to make the best possible use out of it. And I think a big part too when you're like working on Patreon or you're working with a smaller community is you need to bring the community in to make them a part of what you're doing. And so everything I do, I try to think of a way to make the community, our patrons, our supporters, a part of it. Because I feel like that is what creates a great community in the first place, which was really my one goal when I started Sifted, is I want to make sure I create a community online that I want to be a part of. Because I never really, everywhere you go, everything is so toxic and people are so angry. I'm like, well, I am going to make an oasis, damn it. And I'm like, even if I have to be a douchebag on my site and kick people off who are trolls, I don't care. They can go off on Twitter and say Shane's an asshole because he kicked me off. I don't care. As long as this community that I wanted to create ends up being what I wanted it to be. And I think when you do stuff like this, a Q&A at the end of your show, or you do like today's high score like we'll be doing tomorrow, I think that helps everyone feel like they're a part of it. And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I'm glad you're leveraging the platform. Man, good for Twitch, too, and Amazon for really pioneering something awesome.
Oh, thank you, FreedX100, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. I should bring that up, actually. Since you don't stream, some of your fans may be on our stream, and if you can't subscribe to his Twitch Prime, then it'd be great if you subscribe to ours.
Yeah, it's free, basically, right?
Yeah, you can just give us $2.50. We actually made a ton of money off that last month. Like, I make more money off Twitch Prime than I do off YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is killing me.
You can't make any money off YouTube.
Yeah, it's killing.
But here, it's like, as long as you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you just link your two accounts, your Twitch account and your Amazon Prime, and you click that little button at the top right of the player, and you give us $2.50, just like that.
It's awesome. Yeah, I loved that they
I keep thinking it's going to end. Because it's like,
it
what is Amazon getting out of that? They're just giving us $2.50.
It's to create this, like,
ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. We'll enjoy it while it lasts. So thanks to anybody who subscribed to us. We appreciate it. Let's see. We'll take one more, and then we'll let you go. Actually, well, I don't know. You didn't want to talk about this. I'll ask it anyway. From Gunzilla, what do you think of the new Splinter Cell rumors? So, inside story, that was going to be a topic on today's show, but then he said that he didn't play a lot of Splinter Cell in the past, and so we cut it, but I think you can still answer the question.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. Like Splinter Cell's always been, specifically with Xbox, this important brand.
It was kind of an Xbox aligned.
Yeah. Well, the games, as far as I remember, the games came out first on Xbox, then would migrate to PlayStation later, and some of them never came to PlayStation. And I understand that.
Which explains why you haven't played a lot of them, because you're a PlayStation gamer.
Although Rainbow Six 3, like I said earlier, was my shit on Xbox. I understand that it's a little convoluted for Xbox because of the connection to Ubisoft and the tether to Tom Clancy's kind of IP with them. But outside of that kind of hardware-centric viewpoint, this is a series that there always seems to be a hunger for. And I'm surprised that we haven't gotten more of it, specifically because of the focus with other Tom Clancy games at Ubi that were really great.
They've all been, also most of them have been multi-platform as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Division was awesome, and I played that by myself. And
did you really?
Yeah, the whole thing. And it was awesome.
That's insane.
What I loved about it the most.
You played Destiny?
For like 10 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I wasn't feeling Destiny. But I love the Division. I thought that playing the Division alone really added to the ambience of the game.
You're also from New York. So.
Yeah, and the Christmas, like the perpetual Christmas thing was really cool, and it was eerie playing by yourself. It was awesome, especially going to the dark zone by yourself. Very scary.
That's insane.
Yeah, didn't make it out of there very much.
You didn't. If you did make it out, you didn't make it out with any loot. That's for sure.
No. But that and between that and Siege and a few of these other games, I'm like, well, there's an appetite for something like this, and so I think obviously it's going to come. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for GameFace episode 121. Colin, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Great time. I always have fun talking games with you.
Yeah, it was great. We'll have you back on Fireside Chats soon, too.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be more than willing to come back, even after your awful commute to get here.
No, whatever you need me, just let me know. I'm happy to do it. It's good to put on pants.
Yeah. Before we go, let's bring up Colin's Patreon one more time. Yeah, bring up Colin's. There you go. Patreon.com/ColinsLastStand if you want to contribute to his Patreon, and you should. He does good stuff.
Cool, thank you.
Yep, and we're at patreon.com/sifted if you'd like to kick us a couple dollars. Buy us a beer for the month. Give us $4, and I'll buy a beer, and I'll drink it to you. So next week, Matt should be back, our normal co-host. At least I hope so. He underwent a procedure. He seems to be recovering very well, so he should be back next week. And we'll see you next Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific. GameFace is up and out.